Chapter 562. As the jade ruler enveloped over, Su Zimo did not dare to take it head-on and could only retreat. The jade ruler was a Khanate spirit weapon. Given the power released by Shi Wuya, even a supreme-grade spirit weapon would be smashed to smithereens by his ruler. Unless he summoned Blood Quencher or the Coiling Dragon Seal. However, it would be difficult to conceal Su Zimo's identity if he summoned those two weapons. In Shi Wuya's hands, the jade ruler shone with a resplendent light. Even with Su Zimo's strong physique, he would definitely be severely injured if he was struck by the jade ruler. Su Zimo made use of the agility of his movement technique and his tough yet flexible physique to dodge repeatedly. Both of their movement techniques were already at their limits. Although Su Zimo was still fine, he had to defend himself. However, if he continued to defend, he would definitely lose. His space to dodge was getting smaller and smaller. He had to make a decision. At that thought, a vicious glint flashed through Su Zimo's eyes. Glaring at the incoming jade ruler with a demonic glint, he reached out and grabbed it. "You must have a death wish." Shi Wuya harumphed coldly. Suddenly, Su Zimo opened his mouth and hollered. "Fight!" His voice was like thunder and exploded in Shi Wuya's ears. If it was anyone else, they would have died on the spot from Su Zimo's hollering at such a close distance, bleeding from all orifices. Even powerful paragons would be momentarily dazed. However, Shi Wuya merely frowned and his blood chi surged, suppressing the discomfort in his heart instantly. At the same time, Su Zimo's palm landed on his jade ruler. One coil and one tremble. A strange, distorted power was used on the jade ruler. Shi Wuya's expression changed starkly. He could clearly feel a tearing sensation coming from his palm and the jade ruler was about to fly out of his hands. His entire arm was contorted and the pain was unbearable. His sleeves could not withstand that power and exploded into shreds. Bam! The jade ruler left his hand and turned into a ray of light, piercing into the wall beside him. Su Zimo's movements did not stop. He pressed forward and swung his right arm. The veins on his fist were exposed, and his flesh and blood expanded. It was as if a large seal had descended from the sky, emitting a thick smell of blood. The body is like glass, clear inside and out, pure and unblemished, indestructible. The mantra of the Glazed Heart Sutra flowed rapidly through Shi Wuya's mind. A powerful force erupted. Suddenly, Shi Wuya's body was shrouded with a mysterious glow that resembled glass, flawless and indestructible. 1,000-ton finger. Shi Wuya extended a finger. Spiritual energy gushed out from this finger, as if it had condensed into jade. It contained an extremely terrifying power as it pointed at the incoming seal. Boom! The finger collided with the seal, causing a loud explosion. Su Zimo groaned. A sharp and powerful force erupted, almost piercing through his palm. Shi Wuya did not have it easy either. The seal conjured by Su Zimo's fist nearly snapped his finger. Although the two of them clashed head-on, neither of them retreated and punched once more. Bang! Bang! The two fists intersected and struck the other party's chest at almost the same time. 6 spirit lights shone around Su Zimo's body. The power of the mystic gold silk armor was fully released. Even so, he could still sense the terrifying power surging into his body through the mystic gold silk armor, causing his organs to tremble. Although the mystic gold silk armor was a Khanate defensive spirit weapon, it was not omnipotent. The inner armor could only defend against as much damage as possible. If the other party was sufficiently strong and terrifying, they could destroy the mystic gold silk armor. Back when he first saw the mystic gold silk armor, it was already damaged with scattered spirit patterns and even Khanate spirit patterns were broken into pieces. Exclamation point. Su Zimo spat out a mouthful of blood and staggered in retreat. On the other side, Shi Wuya was motionless and his expression was extremely terrible. Even with his Glass Heart Sutra and his supreme-grade defensive inner armor, he could not defend against Su Zimo's punch completely. A stream of blood flowed down from the corner of Shibuya's lips. Both of them were injured at the same time. The crowd was in an uproar. Suzumo's injury was within everyone's expectations. However, they did not expect Shibuya to be injured as well. It's a pity for that monster incarnate of Divine Phoenix Island. Mu Dongqing suddenly remarked from afar. Why? Bai Yuhan was puzzled. Mu Dongqing replied, given that person's talent, if he were to cultivate to perfected Jin Dan and fight Shibuya in his peak condition, it would be hard to tell who would win. Right now, the successor of Divine Phoenix Island has exhausted all his trump cards, spirit energy, and stamina. As long as Shibuya releases the Jin Dan phenomenon, he's dead for sure. On the battlefield, Shibuya's expression darkened and his eyes were filled with killing intent as he grit his teeth. It's been a long time since anyone has been able to injure me. Good, very good. Shibuya strode towards Suzumo slowly and the aura emanating from his body turned increasingly terrifying. Let me show you my Jin Dan phenomenon. Glass divine light. The moment he said that, a series of bedazzling, colorful halos shone around Shibuya's body in a bedazzling manner. Glass divine light, 13th place on the previous phenomenon ranking. This was a truly powerful phenomenon that had been passed down through the ages and was ranked in the top 20 of every phenomenon ranking. You should be proud that you can die to glass divine light. Standing in midair, Shibuya looked down at Suzumo from above as though he was looking at an ant. Fufu. Suzumo laughed. Many cultivators froze for a moment, thinking that Suzumo had gone mad. Under such circumstances, no matter who it was, they wouldn't be able to laugh. How do you think I managed to suppress the paragons of the immortal, Buddhist and fiend sects beneath the human emperor's palace? Suzumo said coolly as a scarlet inner core circulated slowly in his chest. His eyes lit up and his black hair fluttered without any wind, emitting a terrifying aura. The expressions of many cultivators changed starkly. Demonic chi. Pest. He's a demon. The rumors are true. There were way too many rumors about the monster incarnate of Divine Phoenix Island. Many of them were too bizarre and cultivators who had not witnessed it personally would not believe them. It was only at this moment that everyone realized the meaning of the word monster incarnate. Crackle. Pang. 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 Suzumo's tendons and bones rang together as his flesh expanded. Right in front of everyone, Suzumo's blood chi burst forth and his body expanded. In the blink of an eye, he was 100 feet tall and resembled an indomitable fiend celestial with a torrential ferocious aura. Green veins popped up on his body and extended like snakes. Every single inch of his muscles protruded slightly and coiled together, shimmering with a metallic luster. It was indestructible. One after another, lifelike ancient demons with sharp fangs and claws surrounded that terrifying body. Wild ox, stone bear, anaconda, sanguine ape, each of the great demons glared with bloodshot eyes, filled with murderous intent. Roar. Many ancient demons let out enraged roars that shook the heavens and earth. Many cultivators felt their hearts skip a beat and they kept silent out of fear. Standing in the middle of the 7 ancient demons, Suzumo was like a divine being with a blazing gaze and a domineering aura. Even against Shibuya's Jin Dan phenomenon, he was not disadvantaged. Chapter 563. Heavens, what's that? A series of exclamations could be heard from the crowd. The paragons of the North region were shocked, they had never seen something as such up till this point of their cultivation. The figure that was 100 feet tall stood on the battlefield like an indomitable divine being with a torrential might that blanketed the surroundings. In front of that divine being, Shibuya was as insignificant as an ant. If not for the support of the ancient phenomenon, Shibuya's aura would have been completely suppressed by the monster incarnate of Divine Phoenix Island. So, it's a beast. Shibuya channeled the Jin Dan with all his might and the power of the phenomenon surged and glass divine light shone brightly. the ancient phenomenon merely released streams of rainbow light. Although it did not seem like it had a majestic aura, its might was extremely terrifying. Any cultivator that came into contact with the rainbow light would have their flesh crystallized instantly like ice without any life force. A single touch would cause them to explode into dust. Most spirit weapons would shatter on the spot when they were enveloped by the rainbow light. Even supreme-grade spirit weapons were not spared. The fact that it was called a divine light was proof of the might of the ancient phenomenon. Its divine might was so vast that even ghosts and gods would have to flee. Under normal circumstances, even pure-blooded ferocious beasts would not be able to defend against the killing power of the glass divine light. However, Su Zimo cultivated the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness. This was the foundation that Dai Yu left for him to establish himself in the cultivation world and was also the cornerstone for him to enter the cultivation world. It was because of this supreme demon classic that Su Zimo was able to defeat many paragons beneath the human emperor's palace and fight against the sealers before finally entering the human emperor's palace. Although Su Zimo had just formed his inner core, the terror of the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness was already revealed. The 7 ancient demons circled around with a scarlet demonic chi that was extremely rich rumbling. The demonic chi and glass divine light came into contact and collided. Buzz! Buzz! A shuddering sound echoed from the center of the battlefield. The two completely different powers were corroding one another and neither was willing to submit to the other. A series of terrifying shockwaves spread through the voids. The expressions of Taba Feng, Murong Wushuang and the others changed starkly as they retreated hurriedly. Some of the cultivators who were unable to dodge in time were affected by the aftershocks of the two types of power. Their bodies exploded on the spot, and they perished. The battle between the two monstrous geniuses had turned the center of the battlefield into a forbidden zone. Roar! The 7 big ancient demons roared in unison, their voices deafening. The cultivators who were closer to him were stunned and fainted on the spot. Demonic chi rumbled and a torrential ferocious aura surged. The 7 ancient demons opened their bloodied mouths and thick saliva flowed between their teeth as they lunged towards Shibuya. Puff! 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 7-colored light burst forth. Shibuya's body was like glass, translucent and flawless. He was like a blazing sun within it. The rays of multicolored light were like sharp swords, revealing their sharpness and extremely sharp. The thousands of sharp swords pierced through the layers of demonic chi, causing the 7 ancient demons to be riddled with wounds. The demonic aura surrounding Su Zimo had obviously thinned out a lot. In the end, Shibuya had the upper hand in the fight between the two monster incarnates. No matter what, Shibuya was a perfected Jin Dan cultivator. However, Su Zimo was only at initial formation of his inner core. As the number 1 perfected being of the North region, there was no way Shibuya would miss out on such an opportunity when he sensed the slight changes in the situation. Kill! Shibuya hollered and his aura intensified. The glass divine light in his hands condensed slowly, forming a sparkling and translucent saber. Slay! Swash! Accompanied by Shibuya's holler, the glass divine saber tore through the demonic chi in front of Su Zimo and severed the head of the wild bull demon king. The demonic chi dimmed as well. Slash again! Shibuya hollered with a domineering aura. Exclamation point. The stone bear demon king's body was sliced into 2 and dissipated. The demonic chi dimmed once more. Slash! 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 Shibuya slashed out 5 times consecutively and the remaining 5 ancient demon kings were killed by the glass divine saber. Their limbs flew everywhere in a tragic manner. In the blink of an eye, the 7 ancient demon kings surrounding Su Zimo were destroyed by the glass divine light. The demonic chi was at its weakest. Without the protection of the demonic chi, even if Su Zimo's physique was unparalleled, there was no way he could withstand the might of the glass divine light. The situation was clear. Sigh, he's still lacking a little after all, Mu Dongqing sighed. The monster incarnate of Divine Phoenix Island first fought against the paragons of the North region. Now that his spirit energy is depleted, he's fighting against the number one perfected being of the North region. Indeed, he doesn't have much of a chance of winning. Furthermore, there's a difference of several levels between their cultivations. Bai Yuhan nodded. If that person had cultivated to perfected Jin Dan, the outcome of this battle would truly be unpredictable. That's a double phenomenon. Furthermore, both of them are primordial phenomenons that have been lost in history. To think that they would die just like that. Everyone has the right to kill someone from Divine Phoenix Island who wants to enter Tianhuang mainland and fight for the vermilion fruit. That's right, that person is a demon. So what if he's killed? Just now, Su Zimo had killed way too many paragons of the North region and had long formed a blood feud with the major factions and sects of the North region. Nobody wanted him to win. Ha 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 ha. When Shibuya saw that the outcome was set, he could not help but burst into laughter. A beast is a beast after all. Do you really think that you can fight against me just because you suppressed so many paragons beneath the human emperor's palace? Shibuya strode forward and slashed forward with his saber. Su Zimo grit his teeth and his inner core churned furiously, condensing the remaining demonic chi around him into a shield of demonic chi. Boom! The shield exploded. Su Zimo grunted dully. The power of the phenomenon entered his body and the surface of his massive body exploded, creating a series of cracks that dripped with blood in a frightening manner. Can't hold on any longer. Shibuya had an excited expression and a hint of ferocity could be seen in his eyes as he charged forward once more. Su Zimo raised his right hand with the divine phoenix bone and clenched it into a fist, blocking in front of him. Clang! The sound of metal clashing echoed. Although the glass divine light did not shatter the divine phoenix bone, the light splattered and landed on Su Zimo's exposed arm, slicing off pieces of crystallized flesh. Su Zimo's face was drained of color as he spat out a mouthful of blood. Although the divine phoenix bone was indestructible, it was not omnipotent. He could not control the divine phoenix bone. He could not release the true power of the divine phoenix bone as well. Die! Shibuya bellowed once more in an overbearing manner. The glass saber descended from the skies, as though it wanted to slice through the voids and sever all living beings before it. Am I going to lose just like that? Against the suppression of the immense power, Su Zimo's features were contorted as he howled internally, I'm indignant. On the surface, this was a fight between two paragons. However, in reality, it was more like a fight between immortals and demons. It was more like a fight between Dai Yu's legacy and the legacy of the ancient super sects. Given Dai Yu's personality, there were some things that she would definitely not say to Su Zimo. However, Dai Yu was using her actions to express her intentions. If fate doesn't allow you to cultivate immortality, I'll change your fate for you. If Iridescent Cloud's palace doesn't want you, I'll impart to you my capabilities so that you'll be stronger than all the successors of the super sects in this world. That was Dai Yu's pride. It was also Su Zimo's pride. Chapter 564. 8 years ago, Dai Yu transformed into a butterfly and disappeared without a trace ever since. However, during this period of time, Su Zimo did not feel lonely at all. Perhaps, Dai Yu was watching him the entire time in a certain world. Furthermore, Su Zimo was certain that his future was not in Tianhuang mainland. One day, he would break through the void before him and head to that foreign world to chase after Dai Yu. To meet her once. To stand before her and tell her, I'm here. Even if there were countless obstacles ahead, even if it was an endless purgatory and even if there were countless strong enemies blocking his path, Su Zimo's determination could not be shaken. At the thought of Dai Yu, Su Zimo felt a sense of heroism. At the thought of Dai Yu, he could not help but recall her domineering methods. How could he lose to the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness? How could Dai Yu lose? How could I lose? I'm not convinced. Ah! Suzumo reared his head and howled into the skies. His blood chi surged as his inner core churned and his tendons and bones rang at the same time. His blood and marrow flowed and his organs shuddered. Body tempering section, tendons transformation section, bones strengthening section, marrow cleansing section, organs refinement section, orifice clearing section, core formation section, 7 sutras flowed through his heart. Strange noises could be faintly heard coming from within the 30-meter-tall body. It was as though someone was chanting those sutras endlessly. With the support of those sounds, the cracks on Suzumo's body healed at a speed visible to the naked eye. Many voices gradually converged, as if something had been triggered, and a force that caused one's heart to tremble burst forth. Suzumo's eyes lit up. Against the incoming glass saber, the demonic chi within his body surged and he welcomed it instead of retreating. You don't know what's good for you. Shibuya's gaze was sharp as he gripped the glass saber with both hands and slashed viciously. Boom! Suzumo threw out a punch. At the same time, a gigantic demon beast appeared vaguely from the rumbling demonic chi behind him. It seemed to be a blood-colored butterfly that was faintly discernible. 2 bright full moons were engraved on the butterfly's wings, looking like a pair of indifferent eyes. Suzumo punched out. The blood-colored butterfly remained still, but the moon-like eyes on its wings flickered. An incomparably powerful force surged into Suzumo's body, following his fist, and instantly exploded. Boom! With an earth-shattering boom, the long saber collided with Suzumo's fist. Shibuya's expression changed time and time again. There was actually a hint of panic and fear in the depths of his eyes. Right in front of everyone, the glass saber in Shibuya's hands shattered. The 7-colored light dissipated. Shibuya's Jin Dan phenomenon collapsed completely. Pooh! Shibuya's body shuddered as though he was struck by lightning. Feeling salty in his throat, he could not help but spit out a mouthful of blood. The heavenly talents of the North region were in an uproar. Everyone could see that the monster incarnate of Divine Phoenix Island was already in a dire situation and could die at any moment. However, for some unknown reason, he suddenly burst forth and shattered Shibuya's Jin Dan phenomenon instead. In the blink of an eye, the situation was reversed. The faintly discernible blood-colored butterfly behind Suzumo had already vanished. However, without the protection of the Jin Dan phenomenon, Shibuya was definitely not a match for the demonized Suzumo. Boom! Suzumo strode forward and extended his gigantic palm that blotted out the skies, pressing down viciously. Unable to dodge in time, Shibuya could only raise his arm to defend. Bang! The two of them clashed head-on and it was as though they were defeated. Shibuya merely felt an unbearable pain in his arm and instantly, he broke out in cold sweat. Suzumo did not give Shibuya a chance to catch his breath at all. Both of them were rare geniuses in melee combat and there was naturally no way they would miss out on such an opportunity. Another punch came smashing down. It was as though a peerless gigantic seal had descended from the firmaments, as though it wanted to shatter the world. Boom! Shibuya could only raise his arms to defend against it. His body shuddered and he retreated once more. Exclamation point. He spat out another mouthful of blood that was already greenish-black in color. His organs were shaken. Otherwise, his blood would definitely be scarlet. At that moment, Shibuya could no longer feel any pain in his arms, they were numb from the beating. Suzumo's timing was extremely precise and he did not even have the chance to summon weapons, talismans, or elixirs from his storage bag. If this continued, both of his arms would be broken by Suzumo within a few rounds. The two of them were extremely close. Shibuya could clearly sense that there was a hint of blood in Suzumo's breath as well. This meant that Suzumo was severely injured in this battle as well. At that moment, both of them were at the end of their rope. If he were to fight to the death, it would be hard to say who would win. However, Suzumo's aura was way too strong and sharp. After a few consecutive swings, Shibuya had already given up on the thought of fighting to the death with Suzumo. He could not die. His lifespan was less than 100 years. He was the number one perfected being of the North region and his future was immeasurable at such a young age. As long as Shibuya willed it, he could even advance to the nascent soul realm. Of course, there was no way he could break through in such an intense battlefield. It was a qualitative leap from the Jin Dan realm to the nascent soul realm. Even if he was an unprecedented paragon, there was no guarantee of success. Breaking through on the battlefield was no different from suicide. If he was disturbed, he would die on his own without the need for anyone else to do anything. Suddenly, Shibuya hollered, "What are you guys waiting for? This beast's blood chi is weak and he's only strong on the outside. You guys can kill him right here with a casual attack." His statement was proof that Shibuya had already lost. The reputation that he had built up over the years was about to plummet. However, compared to his life, Shibuya no longer cared. As long as he survived, he would be able to obtain the vermilion fruit and take away all the protection on Suzumo. His combat strength would definitely rise to a whole new level. At that time, he would even have a high chance of entering the top 10 of the phenomenon ranking after entering the intermediate ancient battlefield. He might even be able to fight against the number 1 of the phenomenon ranking, Dean. He was going to reclaim the reputation and dignity that he had lost today personally. Nobody moved. Even the masked man who came with Shibuya did not make a move and merely watched everything with a cold gaze. He had his own selfish motives as well. Initially, Shibuya was suppressing him and he would never be able to make a name for himself. He would never be able to compare to Shibuya in terms of the resources of the sect. But now, if Shibuya died and the monster incarnate of Divine Phoenix Island was severely injured, he would have a high chance of becoming the final victor and obtaining all the treasures. There were only 2 reasons why the others did not move. On the one hand, the paragons of the North region were still fearful of Suzumo and had lingering fears. On the other hand, everyone was still observing. In a fight between 2 tigers, one was bound to be injured. The wisest choice for everyone was to sit back and watch the tigers fight. Now was not the best time to make a move. Although Taba Feng, Murong Wushuang and the others were expressionless on the surface, they were secretly delighted. Up till this point of the fight for the vermilion fruit, there had been many twists and turns. Now, there were some subtle changes to the situation. Initially, it was already extremely fortunate for them to be able to survive and there was no chance of them obtaining the vermilion fruit. But now, the situation had taken a turn for the better. Every single one of them could be the biggest winner. Chapter 565. The old man from Glass Palace stood in the pavilion with his hands behind his back expressionlessly, looking in the direction of the great Qian ruins with an indifferent expression. The old man looked scrawny as though a gust of wind could blow him over. However, none of the Jining Jinjuan outside the pavilion dared to move. With Shibuya's appearance, there was no longer any suspense in the fight for the vermilion fruit. To everyone, the paragons of the North region could only resign themselves to fate. Cultivators with sharp eyes and sharp senses could still be considered rational if they left decisively and gave up on the fight for the vermilion fruit. However, if they wanted to fight against Shibuya for the vermilion fruit, they would be courting death. The Jining Jinjuan of Duanmu clan had a grim expression. Duanmu Kong was definitely the most talented perfected Jin Dan in the past 500 years of the Duanmu clan and swept through all cultivators of the same cultivation realm. To think that he would fall in the hands of Shibuya. Suddenly, the fight for the vermilion fruit became dull after Shibuya's appearance. That was because everyone knew the outcome of the battle. It was no wonder why the paragons of the North region suffered such heavy casualties. It was no wonder why even the paragons of the 10 upper sects and 4 gentry clans died one after another. It was no wonder why the successors of the 2 ancient aristocratic families could not suppress the situation even after they appeared. Now, everything was explained. It was all because of Shibuya. Many Jinying Jinjuan stood silently, waiting for the final outcome. All of a sudden, the old man from Glass Palace, who was initially standing with his hands behind his back, frowned and swiped his withered palm across his storage bag, taking out a destiny talisman and looking at it. The light on the destiny talisman flickered continuously, as though it was struck by an immense impact. The old man from Glass Palace narrowed his eyes and a cold glint shone in his murky eyes. The young master seems to be in trouble. There's actually a paragon in the North region who can fight against the young master as such. The moment that thought crossed the mind of the old man from Glass Palace, the light on the destiny talisman flickered. After pausing for a moment, the light on the destiny talisman dimmed gradually. The expression of the old man from Glass Palace changed. This was no longer pure trouble. Shibuya seemed to be in an unprecedented danger and could die at any moment. The abnormality of the destiny talisman attracted the gazes of the other Jinying Jinjuan as well. Restlessness began to spread from the crowd. What's going on? This life talisman belongs to Shibuya. That should be the case. Judging from the old man's expression, he seems to be very concerned. Who in the North region can threaten Shibuya? I'm not sure. The old man from Glass Palace gripped his destiny talisman with a dark expression. After hesitating for a moment, a resolute look flashed through the eyes of the old man from Glass Palace as he remarked coldly, a nascent soul must have infiltrated the great Qian ruins. Otherwise, given boundless combat strength, even if the paragons of the North region joined forces, they would not be a match for him. Shibuya indeed had the ability to do so. However, it was impossible for Jinying Jinjuan to infiltrate the great Qian ruins. These Jinying Jinjuan had gathered here, and their divine senses had covered the entire area. It was impossible for a Jinying Jinjuan to sneak in without them noticing. The reason why the Glass Palace old man said that was self-evident. Let's see who dares to interfere with the fight for the vermilion fruit. The old man from Glass Palace soared into the air and transformed into a streak of light that sped towards the great Qian ruins. The other Jinying Jinjuan could not sit still any longer and wanted to check out what was going on in the great Qian ruins. Many Jinying Jinjuan could vaguely sense that things were not as simple as they had imagined. Countless figures soared into the air. In the center of the ruins, the fight between the two monster incarnates was still ongoing. Shibuya was drenched in sweat and retreated repeatedly, panting heavily in a wretched manner. Su Zimo was not in a good condition either. Many paragons could clearly sense that Su Zimo's footsteps were getting heavier and his blood qi was depleted. His body had already descended from its initial height of 100 feet to 2 meters, his stamina was already at its limits. Even so, he had no intention of stopping. Su Zimo's eyes shone fiercely. Although his stamina was depleted, his aura was still superior to Shibuya's. Every single punch was delivered with all his might. Shibuya's gaze was menacing as he grit his teeth. B*****, can't you tell that the others are eyeing us covetously and want to reap the benefits? Even if you kill me, you'll be killed mercilessly as well. Ha! Su Zimo smirked, revealing a row of pearly white teeth. How dare you call me a B*****? I'll kill you first before we talk about anything else. You lunatic. Shibuya's hair was disheveled as he cursed, completely losing the bearing of the #1 perfected being of the North region. Snap! Su Zimo delivered yet another punch. Instinctively, Shibuya raised his arm to defend, but the sound of bones cracking could be heard in midair. Pust! Shibuya gasped in pain and his expression changed starkly. He had been cultivating the glass mental sutra all year round and his flesh and bones were no weaker than divine weapons. Even if he was struck by a supreme-grade spirit weapon, his foundation might not be injured. But now, his arm was broken by the monster incarnate of divine Phoenix Island. Shibuya's heart skipped a beat after his arm was broken and he nearly fainted from the pain. Naturally, his movements were sluggish. Su Zimo's eyes lit up. There was no way he was going to miss out on an opportunity as such. Su Zimo closed in and arrived before Shibuya in a flash with a single step. Ah! Shibuya roared and used the last of his strength to bend his elbow. Like an inverted spear, he stabbed down viciously towards Su Zimo. Shibuya could sense the aura of death. This was his final gambit before his death. Throughout history, there have been countless cultivators who had the upper hand the entire time only to be killed at the final juncture. Even if Shibuya was completely drained of his stamina, that elbow strike would definitely be able to create a gigantic hole in Su Zimo's body. At that time, it would be hard to tell who would survive. However, it was a pity that Su Zimo seemed to have expected this. The moment he arrived before Shibuya and the two of them were mere feet apart, Su Zimo's body suddenly went limp and coiled around Shibuya's body like an anaconda. The change in move this time round was extremely strange. Su Zimo's fighting style had always been firm and unyielding. Now that there was such a change, Shibuya's final gambit was for naught. At that moment, Su Zimo's body coiled around Shibuya's body and he took a deep breath. In the eyes of many paragons, it was as though there was truly an anaconda coiling around Shibuya's body. It was sucking in air and its body expanded, rearing its head and shrieking as though it wanted to devour the sun and moon. Anaconda coiling. It was a killing move from the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness. This move utilized the flexibility of tendons to their limits. Thud. 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 A series of sounds echoed from Su Zimo's body, as though an ancient god of war was pulling a bowstring. Shibuya could not move at all. His mouth was wide open and strange sounds could be heard coming from the depths of his throat, as though he was trying to breathe. One of the reasons why anaconda coiling was a killing move was because it could cause one to suffocate. Shibuya's eyeballs bulged and were bloodshot. After a long period of suffocation, his entire face was a frightening purplish-green color. Crack. Crack. A series of cracking sounds could be heard. Shibuya's tendons and bones were crushed by Su Zimo's anaconda coiling. This body that could be considered as perfect was already distorted beyond recognition. It was a shocking sight with all tendons and bones shattered and there was no life left. Shibuya's gaze dimmed and his head tilted to the side, he died on the spot. End of chapter. Chapter 566. Shibuya was once the number one perfected being of the North region and was invincible in the cultivation world. Nobody of the same cultivation realm dared to go against him. Although he rarely made a move for the past 30 years, he was still an invincible existence in the hearts of the major factions and sects of the North region. Nobody expected that Shibuya would be alarmed by the fight for the vermilion fruit. The paragons were even more surprised. Shibuya would die in the great Qian ruins, having his tendons and bones snapped and killed forcefully. Looking at the tall and muscular figure on the battlefield, the geniuses actually felt that this was unreal, and they sighed in their hearts. That was how cruel the cultivation world was. Even if one cultivated to Shibuya's cultivation realm and possessed such terrifying combat strength, they would still be killed mercilessly. No matter how glorious their past was, the fallen paragons would eventually be buried in the long river of time and forgotten. This fight for the vermilion fruit had already far exceeded the paragons' initial expectations. There were way too many paragons that had fallen. Corpses were strewn everywhere and blood flowed like rivers. It was way too tragic. Furthermore, up till this point, no one knew who the vermilion fruit would end up in or who the final winner would be. There was only one thing that everyone was certain of. From this day forth, the number one perfected being of the North region had a new owner. That person was going to die before long as well. Everyone could see how weak Su Zimo was. At that moment, any perfected being of Jin Dan could probably take his life if he stood out. Although most of the remaining paragons were injured, their eyes shone brightly when they looked at Su Zimo, as though they wanted to skin him alive. Finally, a cultivator could not hold it in any longer and stood out. A centipede died but did not fall down. Although he could tell that Su Zimo was exhausted, that person did not dare to advance and merely hid far away, conjuring a spirit art and hollering softly. Spirit energy surged and formed a palm in midair, slapping towards Su Zimo viciously. Boom! The palm of spirit energy slapped Su Zimo heavily without any obstruction. Su Zimo grunted dully and staggered from the impact. His legs went limp and he nearly fell to the ground. Seeing this, the Skyprides finally relaxed. Hee, so the legendary number 1 evildoer of all times is nothing more than this. There are times when you run out of strength. It's just a beast. Humph. How dare a beast try to snatch the vermilion fruit in front of us humans? What wishful thinking. The paragon of heavenly piercing sword sect waved his sword and strode towards Su Zimo slowly with a cold smirk and killing intent in his eyes. Previously, his chest had been slashed by Su Zimo. Although the wound wasn't deep, he was very scheming. After weighing the situation, he took advantage of the situation and retreated, choosing to watch coldly from the sidelines to preserve his strength. With the help of the blood-staunching powder and other miraculous medicines, the wound on his chest had almost completely healed. At that moment, all the paragons were injured and could not conjure the Jin Dan phenomenon within a short period of time. The real threat to him was the masked man from Glass Palace. However, the paragon of the heavenly piercing sword sect could clearly see that the masked man's cultivation was at the early stage of Jin Dan. If the two of them were to fight, he would definitely have the upper hand. The reason why he stood out now was naturally to control the situation and suppress everything, becoming a fisherman in a fight between two parties. Beast, why aren't you arrogant anymore? Clang! The paragon of heavenly piercing sword sect drew his sword and slashed forward. A moon-white sword beam flashed. A wound appeared on Su Zimo's thigh. Although it wasn't deep, blood seeped out instantly. The paragon of heavenly piercing sword sect did not deal a killing blow with that slash, he was clearly trying to trample on Su Zimo's dignity. Su Zimo did not move at all, as though he did not even have the strength to dodge. His face was pale and only his eyes were bright and piercing. Indeed, he was exhausted after killing Shiwuya. Furthermore, Shiwuya was at perfected Jin Dan and the number 1 perfected being of the North region. His strength was indeed frightening and his physique after cultivating the Glass Mental Sutra was extremely frightening. Su Zimo was rather injured after the consecutive head-on clashes. Fine cracks appeared on his organs one after another. If Shiwuya could hold out for a little longer, it would be hard to tell who would be the one to die. At that moment, Su Zimo did not resist and was merely healing silently to recover his strength. He had the mystic gold silk armor. Be it the spirit art of the first cultivator or the slash of just now by the paragon of heavenly piercing sword sect, they were merely superficial wounds that could not hurt his foundation. It was not as though Su Zimo did not have any trump cards. If he were to use that trump card, the entire world would be turned upside down. When the paragon of heavenly piercing sword sect saw that Su Zimo did not resist, he was even more arrogant and did not stop in his tracks. Swinging his sword, he drew a sword flower. Poof! Blood spurted out from Su Zimo's shoulder once more. Foo-foo! The paragon of heavenly piercing sword sect chuckled and mocked without concealing the mockery in his eyes. Why? You don't even have the strength to retaliate? Su Zimo smirked and said nothing. Sigh, to think that such a peerless monster incarnate would end up in such a state. Mu Dongqing shook his head and sighed gently with a lamenting expression. Bai Yuhan whispered as well, this is what they mean when a tiger falls from the sun and a dragon is trapped in the shallows. This is his fate as well. If not for Shiwuya, he would have left this place a long time ago instead of being humiliated by these fishes. This person has no helpers. If someone could stand out and share some of the burden with him, he wouldn't be in such a miserable state. Mu Dongqing sighed once more. Bai Yuhan nodded. That's right. Who would have the guts to stand beside him and go against the entire North region? Monster incarnate my ass. Die. Heavenly piercing sword sex paragon felt uneasy and did not want to drag this out any longer. Finally, he made up his mind and slashed with his sword. The tip of his sword was aimed at Su Zimo's glabella. If that sword struck, Su Zimo's head would be pierced through. Su Zimo narrowed his gaze and was about to make a move when he suddenly frowned with a look of confusion in his eyes. Buzz! A sword hum sounded. An incomparably resplendent sword beam appeared. The sword beam was so dazzling that it attracted the gazes of all the cultivators. However, the sword was way too fast. It disappeared in a flash. No one could see where the sword came from. Nobody could see the trajectory of the sword. Nobody could see the direction of the sword either. However, everyone could sense the killing intent of the sword. The sword beam retracted. Suddenly, the battlefield went silent. The atmosphere turned strange. Heavenly piercing sword sex paragon paused in his tracks. His gaze turned blank. After a short pause, the long sword in his hand fell to the ground. A thin line of blood appeared on his throat, growing bigger and clearer. Poof! A blood mist spewed out. Heavenly piercing sword sex paragon fell stiffly, he was dead. The paragons were in an uproar. Many cultivators looked around, trying to find the person who attacked. There were not many sword cultivators in the North region. There were even fewer sword cultivators who could pose a threat to heavenly piercing sword sect and cultivate such a terrifying sword technique. Taba Feng and Murong Wushuang glared at a black-robed man in the crowd with conflicted expressions. They were shocked, surprised and mostly confused. The black-robed man wielded a pitch-black sheathed sword in his left hand and slowly walked out of the crowd step by step. Surveying his surroundings, the black-robed man's gaze was empty as though he could not focus. He said slowly, "If you want to kill him, you'll have to get through my sword first." Chapter 567. Su Zimo did not recognize the black-robed swordsman. Neither did he understand why this person wanted to help him. However, he had once sensed an extremely dangerous aura from the black-robed swordsman. Just now, that sword strike had confirmed that feeling. That sword strike was way too fast. Heavenly piercing sword sex paragon did not even have the chance to release Jean Dan's phenomenon before dying on the spot. Where did this lunatic come from? Humph. If he's the helper of that beast from Divine Phoenix Island, he might be a beast as well. Everyone has the right to kill him. Some cultivators were blind and saw that the black-robed swordsman did not have an identity badge on his waist. They thought that he was an itinerant cultivator who had appeared out of nowhere and hollered. At the sight of Su Zimo's imminent death and the appearance of many treasures, all the paragons were envious. There was no way they would let the matter rest just like that. Everyone, let's attack together. What can this person do? A cultivator called out and attacked first. With the first person attacking, there was a second. More and more cultivators stood out. Instantly, spirit energy surged and sword beams streaked through the void in a bedazzling manner, piercing towards the black-robed swordsman on the battlefield like thousands of arrows. The black-robed swordsman's right hand seemed to move slowly as it landed on the pitch-black sword hilt on his left. The moment the black-robed swordsman's right hand gripped the sword hilt, his aura changed abruptly. His originally unfocused gaze suddenly focused, like two sharp swords that were showing off their sharpness. The cultivators who attacked exchanged glances with those two gazes and shuddered. A few cultivators shrieked tragically and closed their eyes hurriedly. Unfortunately, it was too late. Two streams of blood flowed out of the eyes of those cultivators in a horrifying manner. Just by looking at each other, their eyes were already blinded. What strong eyesight! Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat. He cultivated the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness and had already unlocked 2 eye orifices, cultivating a pair of demon eyes with strong eyesight. Even the Buddhist Vajra temple's enraged gaze and the devil's pure maiden sex bewitching eyes could not shake his mind. However, Su Zimo's demonic eyes were still unable to unleash such a terrifying killing power with just a pair of eyes. Su Zimo thought to himself, I really don't know how this person to actually cultivate such a pair of terrifying sword eyes. The black-clothed swordsman's eyes were always empty and unfocused, looking listless. But the moment he held the sword, no one could ignore the killing intent on his body and the sharpness in his eyes. Wang! A sword chime resounded through the heavens and earth. The dazzling sword light from before reappeared, dazzling and dazzling. Ding ding dang dang. The sound of metal clashing could be heard. The numerous flying swords piercing through the air were all broken. The sword light suddenly disappeared. The cultivators who attacked fell from the sky one after another. None of them were spared. When he fell to the ground, he was already a corpse. Although they were prepared, not many of the paragons of the North region present could see the black-clothed swordsman's attack clearly. By the time the paragons reacted, the sword had already returned to its scabbard. The black-clothed swordsman's right hand returned to his side and drooped naturally, as though just now, he had not attacked at all. Right from the beginning, the black-clothed swordsman was expressionless. It was as though the deaths of more than 10 perfected Jin Dan could not stir his emotions, not even the slightest bit. It was a deathly silence. Nobody expected that after the monster incarnate of Divine Phoenix Island, Shi Wuya, and the others, there would be another terrifying cultivator who had yet to make a move. Who could defend against such a terrifying existence? Dugu Jian, you're crazy. Taba Feng hollered with widened eyes. Dugu Jian. When he heard that name, Su Zimo was enlightened. In the North region, there were not many cultivators with that surname. The most famous of them all was the Dugu clan, one of the 4 gentry clans. However, the cultivator named Dugu Jian before him was truly way too different from Taba Feng and the others. Notwithstanding the fact that he did not have an identity badge by his waist, he did not have a single clansman by his side. Su Zimo could sense a sense of loneliness and desolation from Dugu Jian, as though he was incompatible with this world. It was as though there was nothing else in Dugu Jian's world apart from that sword. Apart from that sword, there was nothing else. Only someone with such a state of mind would be able to cultivate a pair of sharp sword eyes as well as such a frightening and murderous sword technique. Dugu Jian, that monster incarnate of Divine Phoenix Island, is a beast and not of our race. Are you going to represent the Dugu clan and stand on his side? Ouyang Xiaoyu of the ancient aristocratic family asked in a deep voice. I am who I am. What has that got to do with the Dugu clan? Dugu Jian's voice was calm as he turned to look at Ouyang Xiaoyu. Although he was still expressionless, there was a hint of mockery in his empty gaze. He was mocking Ouyang Xiaoyu for not understanding such a simple question. I am who I am. What has that got to do with others? Ouyang Xiaoyu was speechless for a moment. Murong Wushuang frowned slightly and looked at Dugu Jian, who was not far away. She could not help but ask, why? I can't stand it, Dugu Jian replied indifferently. Most of the paragons of the North region were confused. Who could he not stand? Who offended him? Murong Wushuang was the only one who had a conflicted expression and sighed internally. She knew what sort of hardships Dugu Jian had experienced in the past and understood the pride in his heart. Su Zimo's current predicament must have resonated with this man. He was once abandoned by this world as well. He was spurned by countless people, besieged by countless people, bullied and humiliated by countless people, and cursed by countless people. At that time, nobody helped him or stood by his side. This man had relied entirely on the sword in his hands to reach where he was today, step by step. He was reclusive not because he hated the world. It was because the world had once abandoned him. The only thing that accompanied him the entire time and had never abandoned him was the black-sheathed sword in his hands. Therefore, he would attack because he could not stand it. He was fearless even if he had to go against the entire world, let alone the paragons of the North region. Su Zimo was motionless. This was a rare opportunity and he had to recover his stamina as much as possible before escaping this place. Now that Shibuya was dead, there was no one in the Great Qian ruins who could threaten him. However, Su Zimo could still sense that danger was approaching. There was no time to waste. The masked man from Glass Palace seemed to have seen through Su Zimo's intentions and walked over slowly. Someone from the Duga clan is already so arrogant. The masked man's voice was hoarse and unpleasant, as though his throat was severely injured like a broken bellows. Get lost or die. The masked man glared at Dugu Jian with a cold gaze filled with hatred. Dugu Jian was expressionless and said nothing. He merely glanced sideways and his right hand moved slowly towards the pitch-black sword hilt on his left. The masked man narrowed his eyes and his hairs stood on end instantly. Buzz! A sword beam flashed. Dugu Jian did not say anything and merely replied with the sword in his hands. Chapter 568. The masked man retreated at an extremely fast speed. The moment the sword beam descended, he had already vanished from his original position. Silence ensued. Crack! 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 The sound of metal tearing was extremely ear-piercing in the silent battlefield. All the paragons could clearly see a sword scar appear on the metal mask worn by the masked man, splitting it into two. Clang! The mask fell, revealing the true appearance of the masked man. Pust! Many people sucked in a cold breath. In fact, some female cultivators even exclaimed. That face was extremely frightening and was filled with menacing wounds. It was filled with potholes as though it was corroded by something, looking menacing like a malevolent ghost. For some reason, Su Zimo felt an indescribable sense of strangeness when he saw that face. Sensing the strange gazes around him, the masked man had a venomous expression. His eyes were filled with endless hatred as he roared from the depths of his throat. I'm going to kill you. The masked man strode forward with a torrential aura. Boom! A series of bedazzling lights appeared behind the masked man, releasing an extremely frightening energy fluctuation that seemed like it could destroy everything in the world. Ancient phenomenon, divine glaze light. Although the masked man's glass divine light was clearly not as terrifying as Shibuya's, it was not to be underestimated either. After all, this was a legacy phenomenon of Glass Palace. Heaven-encompassing sword. Clang! 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 The sound of sword chi reverberated through the world endlessly. A series of sword chi appeared behind Dugu Jian, blanketing the skies and enveloping the firmaments as they tore through the air with a frightening might. Glass Divine Light was ranked 13th on the previous phenomenon ranking. Heaven-encompassing sword was ranked 40th on the previous phenomenon ranking. Yet now, the collision of the two great phenomena was actually evenly matched. On one hand, it was because the masked man's cultivation realm was only at early stage Jin Dan. On the other hand, the might of heaven-encompassing sword was indeed maximized in Dugu Jian's hands. The same Jin Dan phenomenon could be unleashed differently in the hands of different people. Fellow Taoists, if we don't attack now, all of you will become prey once this beast recovers. Ouyang Xiaoyu surveyed the surroundings and said in a deep voice. She had already noticed that Su Zimo was recovering his stamina and circulating qi to heal his injuries. Many of the Sky Prides hesitated. However, after exchanging glances with each other, most of them came to a decision. If he didn't give it his all now, it would be very difficult for him to have such an opportunity in the future. Kill! Someone stepped forward and growled. Kill! 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 Many cultivators roared continuously with great momentum, as if they were emboldening themselves. Flying swords pierced through the air and spirit techniques filled the sky. There was only one target, and that was Su Zimo, who was at the center of the battlefield. Su Zimo's eyes gradually narrowed as an ominous glint flashed in his eyes. Clang clang clang. Before Su Zimo could do anything, Dugujian waved his hand. A portion of the 10,000 strands of sword chi hovering above his head split off to form a sword chi barrier that tightly protected Su Zimo. Boom! 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 The flying sword collided with the sword chi barrier and was sent flying. When the spirit technique collided with it, it instantly dissipated. In terms of head-on combat strength, only the masked man of Glass Palace could match Dugujian. Wang! Sword light flashed. Dugujian attacked again. That sword seemed to have transcended the voids and arrived before Ouyang Xiaoyu instantly. The green wand was the first to sense the killing intent and retreated with Ouyang Xiaoyu on its back. Poof! The sword light entered the green wand's body. The green wand let out a tragic cry. Although it was a pure-blooded ferocious beast, it could not withstand Dugujian's sword. Although the wound was not deep, the moment the sword chi entered its body, all life within its body was destroyed in the blink of an eye. The green wand fell. Ouyang Xiaoyu's face was pale and her eyes were filled with rage as she said hatefully, Dugujian, how dare you injure my spirit beast? Dugujian did not reply. Another sword light flashed. Poof! Ouyang Xiaoyu's chest flushed red and her eyes dimmed gradually. She was a proud daughter of the heavens to begin with and was born into an ancient aristocratic family. Any cultivator who saw her would feel ashamed of their inferiority. There were very few cultivators who could steel themselves to attack her. Unfortunately, she met Dugujian. In Dugujian's eyes, Ouyang Xiaoyu was nothing more than an ordinary cultivator. So what if he killed her? It was no big deal. The proud daughter of an ancient aristocratic family fell from midair and was already dead by the time she hit the ground. Boom! At the end of the day, Dugujian had expended quite a bit of mental energy to protect Su Zimo and kill Ouyang Xiaoyu. The masked man seized the opportunity to strike. Boom! A flawless arm tore through the air and clenched into a fist that resembled a steel hammer, releasing an extremely terrifying power instantly. Dugujian's expression was unchanged. He did not have time to raise his sword and could only punch back. Bang! The two fists collided. Snap! The sound of bones cracking could be heard. Dugujian's wrist was twisted at an extremely exaggerated angle. It was broken by a single punch from the masked man. Glass Palace specialized in body tempering techniques the most in the cultivation world. Even if the disciples of Glass Palace were not Shiwuya, their physiques and melee combat abilities were definitely not something ordinary cultivators could imagine. However, the one that truly terrified everyone was Dugujian. Even though his wrist was broken, Dugujian's emotions did not fluctuate at all. He was still expressionless, as though that was not his hand and he could not feel any pain. He was way too calm. He was so calm that there was no hint of panic from Dugujian. Even though his wrist was broken, Dugujian did not stop and slashed in reverse, not giving the masked man a chance to continue his pursuit. The masked man retreated slightly slower and a bloody gash appeared on his chest. Poof! The masked man's expression changed once more as he spat out a mouthful of blood. He could clearly feel countless extremely sharp sword chis rushing into his body, trying to cut and tear apart his flesh, blood, bones, and internal organs. He hurriedly channeled his blood chi to suppress it. After spitting out a mouthful of blood, he finally stabilized his injuries and expelled the sword chi. Although it seemed like he had the upper hand in this exchange, in reality, the two of them were evenly matched. The only effect of his broken left wrist on Dugujian was that he could no longer grip his scabbard with his left hand. Dugujian's sword technique was not affected at all. Instead, it was even more terrifying. Each time he attacked, a paragon would die. Both sides were in a stalemate. All of a sudden, the sound of robes fluttering could be heard from the distant horizon. A series of incomparably domineering auras burst forth and tore through the air. Those auras were extremely berserk and seemed to be enraged as they sped over. Before they even arrived, they emitted a shocking might that enveloped everyone present. This aura, Jinying Jinjuan. Even Jinying Jinjuan is alarmed, and there are so many of them. The crowd was in an uproar. Everyone knew that once Jinying Jinjuan intervened, they would only be reduced to supporting characters. No one knew who would obtain the vermilion fruit, and it would ultimately depend on the capabilities of Jinying Jinjuan. The only thing everyone was sure of was that someone was going to die. That person had killed way too many paragons of the North region and offended almost all the factions in the North region. He was definitely going to die today. Chapter 569. The gathering of many Jinying Jinjuan had a terrifying might, and all the cultivators in the battle stopped, not daring to act recklessly. The old man from Glass Palace led the way with an extremely grim expression. Although he had already sensed that something was amiss and rushed over with all his might, it was already too late. Shiwuya's destiny talisman had already shattered along the way. Who was it that could kill Shiwuya? There was definitely no perfected Jin Dan of the North region who was a match for Shiwuya. Even if there were Jinying Jinjuan who managed to sneak into the Great Qian ruins, did Shiwuya not even have a chance to escape when he was no match for them? That was impossible. In the blink of an eye, the Jinying Jinjuan had already arrived. When they saw the corpses strewn all over the ground, the eyes of many Jinying Jinjuan were filled with endless shock. They had expected that the fight for the vermilion fruit would be a cruel test for the paragons of the North region. However, none of them expected it to be this tragic. Shiwuya's corpse laid limply on the ground with broken tendons and bones, reduced to a pile of mud. Shiwuya's eyes were widened, as though he could not believe that he would be buried in these ruins even at the moment of his death. Duamu Kang's corpse was torn apart and no longer had its original appearance. Ouyang Xiaoyu's corpse had a narrow sword wound on her chest. It was clear that it was done by a sword Dao expert. There were way too many paragons who could no longer speak as they lay on the ground as cold corpses. The old man from Glass Palace had an extremely sharp gaze as he surveyed the surroundings, sweeping past everyone. When his gaze landed on Su Zimo, it paused for a moment. Su Zimo was calm and composed. There was no hint of fear in his eyes despite facing so many Jinying Jinjuan. Sensing the gaze of the old man from Glass Palace, Su Zimo smirked and glared back with a ferocious glint in his eyes. What's going on? The perfected lord of the Taba clan could not help but ask loudly. Taba Feng pointed at Su Zimo and shouted, "It's all because of him. He's the monster incarnate of Divine Phoenix Island in the ancient battlefield." That's right. The fallen Jin Dan realm fellow Taoists were all killed by this person. Jinying Jinjuan's expression changed slightly. A monstrous genius of Divine Phoenix Island. After leaving the ancient battlefield, this monster incarnate of Divine Phoenix Island had actually come to the North region. No wonder. No wonder the paragons of the North region would suffer such a calamity. This monster incarnate of Divine Phoenix Island was truly terrifying. He was able to kill the number one perfected being of the North region, Shiwuya, at just early stage Jin Dan. Who else could be a match for him? Many Jinying Jinjuan looked at Su Zimo strangely. Apart from hatred, there was something else in their eyes. It was like greed. That kind of gaze was similar to that of the many perfected Jin Dan people when they saw the vermilion fruit. Many Jinying Jinjuan's eyes fell on Su Zimo's right hand, intentionally or unintentionally. There were rumors in the cultivation world that the monster incarnate of Divine Phoenix Island's right hand was a peerless treasure, the Divine Phoenix Bone. The bone of a divine being. Even Void Reversions and Dharma Dao Jun would go crazy for a treasure as such, let alone Jinying Jinjuan. The old man from Glass Palace's gaze flickered. In his eyes, Su Zimo was not as simple as the Divine Phoenix Bone. There were too many secrets on this person's body. Everything about Divine Phoenix Island. The Saber Emperor's inheritance. The secrets of the human emperor's palace. Also, was this monster incarnate of the human race or demon race? How could immortals and demons coexist? All the unknowns could only be revealed after capturing this monster incarnate alive. Monster incarnate of Divine Phoenix Island. Very good, very good. The old man from Glass Palace's tone was cold as he withdrew an ancient mirror from his storage bag. Let's see what your true form is, monster incarnate. When he heard that, Su Zimo's heart sank. Before he could react, the old man from Glass Palace tossed the mirror in his hands into the air. Instantly, resplendent light shone in a bedazzling manner. Endless resplendent light condensed into a beam of light that descended onto Su Zimo's body. This beam of light contained an extremely mysterious power, but it did not possess much destructive power. However, Su Zimo shuddered and his tendons and bones rang together as his body shrank uncontrollably. His face began to change, and so did his facial features. Under the gazes of countless people, a delicate and pretty face was revealed. Just now, the burly man with a burly figure and rough face had vanished completely. Who is that? The monster incarnate of Divine Phoenix Island? So, the monster incarnate of Divine Phoenix Island is a human. He looks rather refined, like a scholar. To think that such a frail and refined scholar would be such a domineering figure. I really couldn't tell at all. When he heard the discussions around him, Su Zimo's heart sank to the bottom. He knew that he could not hide anything anymore. Even though he saw many Jining Jinjuan descending, Su Zimo was still able to maintain his composure in the face of danger. However, he truly did not expect that his true appearance would be revealed by a mirror after his disguise. In the cultivation world, there was a dermic weapon that targeted demons known as the Demon Revealing Mirror. Although the Demon Revealing Mirror had limited killing power, it could reveal the true form of demons and expose their disguises. Despite all his calculations, Su Zimo still missed out on one thing. Everything was over now that he missed out on that. Su Zimo felt his limbs turn cold and even his hopes turn to dust. Even if he could escape from this place, he would not be able to live for long. He could not return to Misty Peak. Otherwise, Misty Peak would be destroyed because of him. It was even more impossible for him to return to Yen Country. Otherwise, he would bring a calamity to Yen Country. Although the North region was huge, there was no place for him to stay. It was even more impossible for him to escape from the North region. Given his Jin Dan realm cultivation, even if he ran day and night without eating or drinking, it would take him hundreds of years. Furthermore, he had to face the pursuit of various major factions and sects. As long as the fact that he cultivated both immortality and demonic cultivation was exposed, nobody in the world would be able to protect him. From this day forth, Su Zimo would have to turn his back on everyone and become the enemy of the entire world. Although there were many cultivators present, most of them had never seen Su Zimo in person. However, in the vast crowd, there were a few cultivators whose bodies trembled violently. Their eyes revealed disbelief, and their minds were greatly shaken. They almost cried out in surprise. It's him! It's him! Mu Dongqing could not help but mutter to himself with a shocked expression. Bai Yuhan covered her cherry lips with a look of disbelief and could not say anything. Instantly, the two of them finally understood something. It was no wonder why Su Zimo could cultivate to the unprecedented Extreme Foundation establishment realm and become the second human emperor. That was because he was the monster incarnate of Divine Phoenix Island and had once entered the human emperor's palace. So, it's you. Wang Yan of Cloud Valley's eyes lit up as he recognized Su Zimo right away. A month ago, this was the refined scholar who slaughtered the cultivators of Blaze Columbus Valley, Stellar Luna Sect and Shadowless Sect, causing them to scatter. It was no wonder why this person knew about the divine turtle phenomenon as well. So, he was the same person from a month ago. This person had a double phenomenon. In that case, he did not use his full strength a month ago. Today's battle was the true display of his strength without holding back. Something's not right. Suddenly, Wang Yan's expression changed. This person did not hold back today either. A month ago, this person had a gigantic seal that was a Khanate spirit weapon. However, he did not reveal it today. A month ago, this person had a quasi-Khanate spirit weapon and even killed Qian Xinyu of Stellar Luna sect. However, he did not reveal it today either. How many more secrets does this person have? How many more trump cards does he have? At that thought, Wang Yan felt chills run down his spine. Chapter 570. The masked man from Glass Palace was stunned for a moment when he caught sight of Su Zimo's true appearance. Thereafter, his eyes shone with endless hatred and he could not help but laugh with a menacing expression. Fu, ha ha ha. His laughter was hoarse and deep, as though he was a devil from hell. So, it's you. The masked man had a venomous gaze as he snarled, Su Zimo, do you still recognize me? Su Zimo. I seem to have heard that name somewhere before. It's somewhat familiar. A commotion broke out in the crowd. I heard that he's a disciple of a major sect in the territory of Great Zhou. He cultivated to the extreme foundation establishment realm and is known as the second human emperor. His name is Su Zimo. Oh, it's him. I've heard of him. I've heard of him as well. I heard that he was in the limelight in the ancient battlefield as well. He obtained the inheritance of the Saber Emperor, destroyed Poison Sect single-handedly and killed cultivators of Glass Palace and Malevolent Earth Sect. Back then, the monster incarnate of Divine Phoenix Island appeared and stole his limelight in the ancient battlefield. To think that the two of them were the same person. Now that things had come to this, Su Zimo calmed down instead. Su Zimo's gaze was dark as he looked at the masked man's face for a moment, as though he wanted to make out something. Why? You can't recognize me? The masked man smiled and his ugly face looked even more frightening. Pei Chunyu. Su Zimo raised his brows slightly. The Glass Palace cultivators who could recognize him instantly were all dead in the ancient battlefield. There was only one person whose whereabouts were unknown, Pei Chunyu. That's right. It's me. Pei Chunyu grit his teeth and said hatefully, it's all thanks to you that I ended up in this state. The heavens have taken pity on me and I've finally found you. Every single word of Pei Chunyu was filled with endless hatred, as though he wanted to tear Su Zimo into pieces. Back in the misty valley of the ancient battlefield, he fed the beast with his body and took a huge risk to hide in the stomach of a cloud-seeking leopard. That was the only reason why he managed to escape. At the same time, he was corroded by the powerful gastric juices of the cloud-chasing panther, and his face was unrecognizable. During these past few days, he had lost count of how many times he would be frightened awake by that delicate and pretty face in the middle of the night, causing his entire body to tremble and sweat profusely. This face, this figure, had already become his nightmare. He couldn't get rid of it. Su Zimo, you were invincible in the primordial battlefield and undefeated among your peers. I'm sure you never thought that this day would come, right? Pei Chunyu said coldly, I've sworn countless times that I'll make you pay for everything that happened to me 100 times over. I'm going to make you beg for death. I'm going to torture you day and night without a single moment of rest. The Sky Prides felt their hair stand on end. Just how much hatred did one have to possess to be able to utter such words? Su Zimo didn't say a word as he silently healed himself and recovered his strength. When he heard Pei Chunyu's words, Su Zimo smirked mockingly. He looked at Pei Chunyu as if he was looking at a pitiful worm. It was that gaze that triggered Pei Chunyu once more. Su Zimo. Pei Chunyu hollered and clenched his fists so tightly that they crackled. With a menacing expression, he said coldly, don't get cocky. Not only am I going to torture you, I'm going to capture all your loved ones and torture them viciously right in front of you. I'm going to let you witness all of that personally and experience all of that pain. The Sky Prides lamented internally. Pei Chunyu had already gone mad. Unless he could kill Su Zimo and remove his mental demons. Otherwise, it wouldn't be long before his cultivation went berserk and he died. When he heard that, Su Zimo's expression turned cold. He did not have many loved ones. Be it Su Hong or Xiaoning, they were his reverse scales that nobody could touch. Su Zimo was expressionless as he said slowly, Pei Chunyu, you managed to escape the previous time round. Today, you're definitely going to die. Ha 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 ha. Pei Chunyu reared his head in laughter, as though he had heard the funniest joke in the world. You think you can do that? Let alone the fact that you're exhausted and your spirit energy is depleted, so what if you're at your peak condition? Pei Chunyu pointed to the many Jining Jinjuan not far away and shouted, there are many nascent soul seniors here. You're in no place to be cocky. Monster incarnate my ass. In the eyes of Jining Jinjuan, you're nothing more than an ant that can be crushed at any moment. Su Zimo laughed as well. Lowering his head slightly, he twirled his fingers gently and said coolly, do you think that I can't kill you with all these Jining Jinjuan around? Insolent. The old man from Glass Palace suddenly spoke and hollered from the depths of his throat. His voice was like a great bell, like a sudden clap of thunder. Many perfected Jin Dan shuddered as though they were struck by lightning. Their eyes glazed over as they collapsed limply. Su Zimo's expression was unchanged, merely swaying slightly. He cultivated both immortality and demonic cultivation and had a strong physique. Furthermore, he had cultivated a powerful secret skill of sound. Although the voice of the old man from Glass Palace was powerful, it was unable to shake Su Zimo's mind. More than half of the paragons of the North region died in the hands of Su Zimo in this fight for the vermilion fruit. At that moment, countless Jining Jinjuan were glaring at Su Zimo. It was indeed wishful thinking for him to kill Pei Chunyu in front of everyone. However, no matter what, Pei Chunyu had to die. Su Zimo was well aware of that. If Pei Chunyu was allowed to live, he might bring unimaginable trouble to himself, Su Hong and Xiaoning. For others, this short period of rest might not make much of a difference. However, for Su Zimo, this period of time was enough for him to stabilize his injuries and recover some strength. Pei Chunyu, let me tell you one last thing. Su Zimo's expression was cold and his eyes were murderous as he said coldly, even Jining Jinjuan won't be able to protect someone that I, Su Zimo, want to kill. Su Zimo swiped his storage bag and a shimmering golden seal appeared in his palm. It was the Khanate spirit weapon, Coiling Dragon Seal. In just a short while, Su Zimo had already recovered some spirit energy. His dantian churned and spirit energy surged into the Coiling Dragon Seal. Go! Su Zimo flung his palm and the 6 spirit patterns on the Coiling Dragon Seal shone in a bedazzling manner as it smashed down towards Pei Chunyu. It was as though a blazing sun was descending with a terrifying might. Pei Chunyu's expression changed starkly. He had not expected that Su Zimo would be so decisive as to attempt to kill him right in front of Jining Jinjuan. More than that, he had not expected that Su Zimo would be exhausted just now. In just a short while, Su Zimo had already recovered to such an extent. What sort of terrifying regeneration capabilities did he have to have? The gigantic seal smashed down and almost sealed all of Pei Chunyu's escape routes, enveloping him within. How dare you! The old man from Glass Palace hollered and waved his sleeves in rage. Swoosh! His sleeves expanded against the wind and extended dozens of feet in the blink of an eye, covering the skies and enveloping the blazing sun that was descending from midair. Although the blazing sun was scorching, it could not burn through the old man's sleeves. No matter what, Su Zimo was only at early stage Jin Dan, there was no way he was a match for Jining Jinjuan in a head-on clash. Pei Chunyu looked up at the blazing sun that was enveloped by his sleeves and heaved a sigh of relief. If not for the seniors of his sect, he might have been smashed to death by the gigantic seal just now. Right then, Pei Chunyu felt his heart skip a beat. Chapter 571. Something's not right. Pei Chunyu's heart sank. Given how determined Su Zimo was to kill him, how could it be so simple? Was Su Zimo so naive as to think that he could kill him right in front of Jining Jinjuan with a Khanate spirit weapon seal? That was impossible. Su Zimo must have something else up his sleeves. Instinctively, Pei Chunyu looked at Su Zimo. Immediately, his pupils constricted uncontrollably. Unknowingly, a moon-white gigantic bow had appeared in Su Zimo's hands. The bowstring had long been drawn. 5 spirit patterns shone on the gigantic bow. If one focused their attention, they could even make out a 6th spirit pattern. Although it was illusory, it shone with a blinding light. In Pei Chunyu's eyes, it was as though Su Zimo was hugging a full moon at that moment. That full moon was pierced by an icy cold arrow. The arrow was pitch black in color and shone with a faint golden glow. Behind the dark gold arrow, Pei Chunyu caught sight of a firm wrist and a pair of deep, bright eyes. It was as though he was looking at a dead man. The next moment, Pei Chunyu truly caught the scent of death. The dark gold arrow was closing in on him. Pei Chunyu could clearly see the cold glint on the tip of the arrow. However, the delicate face behind the dark gold arrow was gradually blurring. The dark gold arrow tore through the air. Pei Chunyu had clearly caught sight of it, but he realized that his body was frozen and he could not move at all. Save me. Pei Chunyu's eyes were filled with fear as he howled hysterically from the depths of his throat. It was way too fast. The arrow had already shot out the moment the old man from Glass Palace waved his sleeves and rapped the coiling dragon seal. How dare you? The old man from Glass Palace hollered in rage. He had not expected that Su Zimo would have such a frightening trump card after summoning a Khanate spirit weapon. Initially, the dark gold arrow merely shone with a golden glow. However, the moment it left the bowstring, 6 spirit patterns shone on the arrow. It shone brightly. Pust. The sky prides in the crowd gasped in shock. An early-stage Jin Dan had actually taken out 2 innate stage spirit weapons consecutively. Even Shibuya only had 1. Even the many Jining Jinjuan in the northern region were shocked. Inborn spiritual weapon. This was the real killing weapon. When a quasi-Khanate spirit weapon shot out a long arrow, the killing power released in that instant was enough to kill most perfected Jin Dan instantly. Even a cultivator of Shibuya's level might not be able to escape unscathed. Moreover, Pei Chunyu was only at the early stage of Jin Dan. His strength was much weaker than Shibuya's. Wherever the black gold arrow passed, all the spirit chi in the surroundings would be sucked into the arrow, leaving behind a thin and long forbidden zone of spirit chi, causing the black gold arrow to move even faster. It was already too late for the Glass Palace elder to stop him. The black gold arrow transformed into a streak of cold light, arriving in an instant. Suddenly, the jade pendant on Pei Chunyu's waist seemed to have sensed something and shone brightly, releasing a mysterious power. An almost transparent barrier formed around Pei Chunyu's body. Boom! The black gold arrow struck the barrier and let out a deafening bang. Crack! 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 Cracks appeared on the jade pendant instantly. The jade pendant was an expendable defensive spirit weapon that was extremely rare. On the way here, Pei Chunyu's grandfather gave it to him and it could defend against the attack of a peak Jin Dan. Even Shibuya would not be able to shatter the barrier formed by the jade pendant in a single attack. However, that arrow shattered the jade pendant instantly. The black gold arrow was repelled. Pei Chunyu heaved a sigh of relief and a look of relief flashed through his eyes. He would be saved as long as he could defend against that arrow. That was because Jining Jinjuan of Glass Palace was here and would definitely not give Su Zimo a second chance. Right then, Pei Chunyu caught a glimpse of a black gold glint from the corner of his eyes. It was familiar. Poof! Just as Pei Chunyu was distracted, he felt a sharp pain in his chest. Instinctively, he lowered his head. His chest was pierced and blood gushed out from the gruesome wound. Bam! It was only at that moment that Pei Chunyu heard the sound of a bowstring vibrating. That arrow was way too fast. Before the sound of the bowstring vibrating arrived, the black gold arrow had already pierced through him. Suddenly, Pei Chunyu realized something when he heard the sound of the bowstring vibrating. Just now, Su Zimo did not fire a single black gold arrow. There were two. The two black gold arrows were slightly separated from one another and stuck close to each other. Because the speed of the arrows was way too fast, the two black gold arrows tore through the air and turned into cold streaks of light, causing everyone to mistakenly think that it was a single arrow. The first arrow broke through Pei Chunyu's defensive barrier. The second arrow claimed his life. Pei Chunyu's supreme-grade defensive spirit weapon was like paper when the quasi-Khanate spirit weapon was paired with the Khanate spirit weapon, the black gold arrow. That arrow took away all of Pei Chunyu's life force. Su Zimo lowered his arm and kept the moon concealment bow in his storage bag. His expression was calm and his eyes were unfazed. That was a sign of extreme confidence. If I want to kill you, you will definitely die. The battlefield was so silent that one could hear a pin drop. Let alone the Jin Dan paragons of the North region, even Jining Jinjuan had not expected that an early-stage Jin Dan cultivator would be able to kill a glass palace cultivator right under their noses. The entire process seemed simple and happened in the blink of an eye. However, the control of the situation, the requirements for details, and the grasp of timing had all reached perfection. If there was a single mistake, the monster incarnate of Divine Phoenix Island would not have stood a chance. The outcome was that Pei Chunyu was dead. It was as the monster incarnate had said, even Jining Jinjuan would not be able to protect someone he wanted to kill. Taba Feng, Murong Wushuang and the others were even more shocked. It was only at this moment that they realized that Su Zimo's feat of defeating the paragons of the immortal, Buddhist and fiend sects single-handedly under the human emperor's palace was definitely not a fluke or an exaggeration. This man had way too many tricks up his sleeves. It was as though they were endless. Suddenly, a seemingly ridiculous thought crossed some people's minds. That monster incarnate couldn't have escaped alive, right? That was impossible. Those cultivators denied it internally. There were so many Jining Jinjuan here and they had already spread out to seal off Su Zimo's escape routes. Even if he escaped into the skies or underground, there was no way he could have escaped alive. A middle-aged man stood in the air dozens of kilometers away from the Great Qian ruins. His face was a faint golden color that resembled metal and stone. Standing with his hands behind his back, he exuded a shuddering aura as he looked in the direction of the great Zhou dynasty. His eyes flickered and no one knew what he was thinking. All of a sudden, the middle-aged man's expression changed as he slapped his storage bag and withdrew a destiny talisman, looking at it intently. The destiny talisman had already shattered. The shards fell through the gaps of his fingers like butterflies. At. The middle-aged man's eyes widened with killing intent as he hollered. No matter who killed my grandson, I'm going to rip you into pieces and grind your bones to dust. Suddenly, the middle-aged man spun around and sped towards the Great Qian ruins in a flash, disappearing into the horizon before long. Chapter 572. On the battlefield. The old man from Glass Palace had a terrible expression and was extremely grim. A total of 2 perfected beings of Jin Dan came for this trip from Glass Palace. Putting aside the fact that Shi Wuya was dead, even Pei Chunyu had been shot to death right in front of him. Although Shi Wuya was a perfected being of Jin Dan, his status in the sect and in the hearts of the elders was much more important than the ordinary Jining Jinjuan. The sect had groomed Shi Wuya as a titular disciple. Now that Shi Wuya was dead, he would definitely be punished upon his return to the sect. Right now, the only way for him to avoid punishment was to try his best to make up for his mistakes by escorting Su Zimo back to the sect. Little beast, let's see how long more you can be arrogant. The old man from Glass Palace hollered and strode forward, reaching out with his palm, wanting to capture Su Zimo alive. Hee hee. Suddenly, the perfected lord of Dark Ghost sect laughed sinisterly. This little beast killed my disciple. I want his arm as compensation. Swash. The perfected lord of Dark Ghost sect moved his spirit consciousness and conjured a sinister saber that slashed towards Su Zimo's right arm. The severed right arm was fake, his true motive was to obtain the divine phoenix bone. Of the many Jining Jinjuan present, the old man from Glass Palace was not the only one who had his sights set on Su Zimo. All the other perfected lords who were slightly stronger wanted to fight for the divine phoenix bone as well. There was no reason for them to give up an opportunity as such. How dare you? The old man from Glass Palace hollered in rage. Foo-foo. Suddenly, the perfected lord of Duanmu clan laughed. This little beast is vicious and killed my Kong. I'm definitely going to kill him and bring his corpse back to my clan to give my clansmen an explanation. My Ouyang aristocratic family will definitely not let this little beast off either. The perfected lord of Ouyang clan said coldly. Bullsh *T. The perfected lord of Taba clan cursed through the air, that lass from your clan was clearly stabbed to death by a single sword. She wasn't killed by this lad at all. What rights do you have? In that case, your clansman, Taba Fong, is still alive. He is even less qualified. Many nascent souls attacked one after another, wanting to snatch Su Zimo's right arm for a share of the loot. Boom! 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 The power of the nascent soul realm collided. Oppressive might wantonly and multicolored light filled the sky. The momentum was terrifying. The terrifying power spread out, and the surrounding Taoist master Jin Dan's expression changed. He hurriedly retreated, afraid that he would be caught up in it. In the center of the battlefield, Su Zimo stood proudly. Looking at the scene in front of him, his eyes flashed with faint mockery. Everyone, in my opinion, there is no need for us to fight to the death. Suddenly, Murong clan's perfected lord said, why don't you split that lad's divine phoenix bone into a few portions for us? That's good. I agree. Jining Jinjuan immediately agreed. No. The beard of the old man from Glass Palace flared up. Terrifying power burst forth from his seemingly thin and shriveled body. Resplendent light shone everywhere he moved. Even dermic weapons could not get close to him. The old man from Glass Palace said coldly, let's see who dares to fight for the treasure with Glass Palace today. Suddenly, a faint sigh sounded from the center of the battlefield. Instinctively, many Jining Jinjuan stopped and turned over. Su Zimo surveyed his surroundings with a calm expression and said slowly, I expected that everyone would come and I've prepared a huge gift. Please accept it. Humph. Stellar Luna Sect's perfected lord sneered, little beast, you won't be able to escape today even if you have wings. Let's see what other tricks you can play. Escape? Su Zimo smirked and his eyes shone with an inexplicable glint. Everyone, you might be mistaken about something. Many Jining Jinjuan furrowed their brows slightly. The paragons of the North region who were hiding far away were slightly stunned as well, not knowing what Su Zimo meant by that. Su Zimo continued, I'm not the one who's going to escape. It's all of you. Many Jining Jinjuan felt their hearts skip a beat. Before he finished his sentence, Su Zimo's palm knocked against the storage bag on his left waist and he pulled out a bronze square tripod that was more than a meter tall. The tripod was dull and filled with cracks. However, its edges were distinct and it stood between the heavens as though it wanted to pierce through the heavens and split the earth. Ha 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 ha. 7 Kills Sect's perfected lord froze for a moment before rearing his head in laughter. Pointing at the bronze square tripod in Su Zimo's hands, he hollered, indeed, you're a beast without intelligence. Do you think that you can threaten us with this piece of scrap metal? When the other Jining Jinjuan caught sight of the bronze square tripod, they were completely relieved as well. Their expressions were relaxed and their eyes shone with mockery. No matter what grade the bronze square tripod was in the past, even if it was a dermic treasure above dermic weapons, it was now useless and could no longer be used. Without dermic powers, what was the difference between this tripod and scrap metal? Fufu. Su Zimo laughed as well. Indeed, the bronze square tripod could not threaten the Jinying Jinjuan. However, that might not be the case for the golden lava within. The golden lava seemed to be sealed by some sort of power after entering the bronze square tripod. It did not emit any heat and was as calm as water. Su Zimo gripped the legs of the bronze square tripod with both hands and raised it high. Spinning his body, he swung it towards the Jinying Jinjuan around him. Splash! The golden lava spewed out and blotted out the skies. The lava scattered in the void and instantly released a heart-stopping heat that was enough to destroy everything and incinerate all living beings. Many Jinying Jinjuan who were after the divine phoenix bone were all gathered in the surroundings. None of them could avoid the golden lava. As long as they were splattered by the golden lava, even if it was only a single drop, they would burst into a ball of golden flames instantly. They would burn in the void without being extinguished. The bodies of Jinying Jinjuan would be reduced to ashes within dozens of breaths in the blazing golden flames. If they were drenched by the golden lava, they would be devoured instantly without a corpse. The scary thing was that as long as they were tainted by the golden flames, no matter how the Jinying Jinjuan struggled or resisted, they could not extinguish the flames on their bodies. Ah! 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 Tragic cries reverberated through the world. In midair, countless figures that were burning with flames tore through the air. They did not fly far before they turned into ashes and drifted down. The battlefield had already turned into a fiery hell. None of the Jinying Jinjuan could escape this calamity. Even the old man of Glass Palace who specialized in body tempering only lasted for dozens of breaths before collapsing to the ground lifelessly. Only the perfected Jean Dan who were hiding far away were spared. The golden flames burned furiously. The stone pillars in the underground palace were incinerated. The underground palace collapsed and countless rocks rolled down as dust billowed. Wherever the golden lava landed, a gigantic pit would be incinerated. The flames surged into the skies, illuminating the night like it was day. Against the scarlet golden flames, the monster incarnate's figure was faintly discernible, like a god in the flames that watched everything silently. It was over. Everything was over. This fire burned through half of the sky. Even the clouds were scarlet golden in color and were tragic yet beautiful. The world had changed. From this day forth, the entire cultivation world of the North region would be turned upside down. Chapter 573. A hint of confusion flashed through Su Zimo's eyes as he gazed at the endless flames around him. Although he was the one who obtained the vermilion fruit in the end, his identity was exposed as well. It was difficult to determine the pros and cons of that right away. Almost all the sects and factions of the North region were burned by this fire. From this day forth, Su Zimo would face endless pursuit and there was no place for him to stay in the North region. It would be extremely difficult for him to escape from the North region. The North region was way too big. Su Zimo was only at early stage Jean Dan. Even if he was both an immortal and demonic cultivator, he would need 100 years given his speed without any accidents. During this period of time, he would have been killed long ago. Now that this battle was over, Su Zimo had not only offended Glass Palace, he had offended the entire cultivation world of the North region. No matter what, I've got to escape from this place first. Before long, Su Zimo calmed down and made a decision. Picking up the coiling dragon seal that had fallen to the ground, he kept it in his storage bag and donned his green robes once more. Hiding in the bronze square tripod, he tore through the layers of flames and fled into the distance. All of a sudden, another streak of golden light flashed and charged out of the flames. Su Zimo swept his gaze across the golden light and could not help but be stunned. It was a black cover that shone with a golden light. It resembled a gigantic iron pot with a few holes on it. Behind the hole, a pair of eyes that were as black as gems were rolling around. Little fox. This intelligent little thing had made her choice in the end. She had chosen to leave the home that she had lived in for decades. She had chosen to leave her mother and come to the outside world. Su Zimo was reluctant to leave the underground cave as well. However, this was something that the little fox could only make her own choice. Although the cover that resembled an iron pot seemed inconspicuous, it could defend against the surrounding golden flames. Earlier on, many of Jining Jinjuan's dermic weapons were incinerated by the golden flames and turned into ashes. "Come, I'll take you away from here," Su Zimo hollered. The reason the little fox was willing to come out of the cave was all because of him. Su Zimo could not possibly leave the little fox here and not care about it. The little fox knew nothing about the outside world. If it lived alone, it wouldn't last more than a month. The little fox was extremely obedient. With a leap, it carried the fire-warding basket and climbed up Su Zimo's clothes to his shoulder in a few steps. There was a loud thud. A pair of spiritual wings extended from Su Zimo's back. Whoosh! Flapping his spirit wings, Su Zimo circulated his blood chi and sprinted towards the distance at full speed. They hadn't walked far when the sky suddenly darkened. A sinister voice echoed through the great Qian ruins. "Without my orders, no one is allowed to leave today." In the next moment, a terrifying pressure shrouded down, and the countless Yin soldiers and Yin horses in the imperial palace instantly collapsed, turning into Yin Qi. Many of the Jin Dan perfected cultivators who had been watching from the sidelines suddenly changed their expressions. Their bodies involuntarily trembled, and they almost fell to their knees. The pressure was too great. In the face of that pressure, many perfected cultivators of Jin Dan felt incomparably insignificant, like ants that could be crushed to death at any moment. That aura was much stronger than Jining Jinjuan's. Even the golden flames that were initially blazing were much smaller, as though they were intimidated by the aura of the intruder. How scary! Who is it? What's the cultivation realm of the intruder? Could it be a void reversion? A void reversion expert must have appeared. There's no way a 10,000-year vermilion fruit can attract a void reversion. There must be something else going on. Many perfected cultivators of Jin Dan exchanged glances and countless questions flashed through their minds. Su Zimo's expression changed starkly against the sudden pressure as well. He found it difficult to move forward, as though he had sunk into a swamp and was walking slower and slower. However, Su Zimo had no intention of stopping. The intruder was extremely strong. Among the cultivators that Su Zimo had come into contact with, this person's aura was similar to Shura Yen Beichen. A void reversion. Su Zimo did not know why a void reversion would appear. However, he knew that this was his last chance and he had to escape from this place as soon as possible. A middle-aged man in brocade robes descended from the skies with a dark gaze. He surveyed his surroundings and looked at the golden flames that were still burning in midair with a hint of fear in his eyes. When he caught sight of Pei Chunyu's corpse, the fear in the middle-aged man's eyes vanished, leaving behind endless rage and killing intent. There were already cultivators who could not withstand the pressure and recounted everything that happened just now. The middle-aged man shifted his gaze and caught sight of Su Zimo, who was escaping. His expression darkened as he said coldly, "Little beast, you're still thinking of escaping in front of me, Xuanyu Daoren?" Boom! Xuanyu Daoren's spirit consciousness moved. A terrifying might descended instantly. With a bang, Su Zimo's body fell heavily to the ground. The tremendous tremor caused the flesh on the surface of his body to explode and he spat out a mist of blood, worsening his injuries. In the blink of an eye, Su Zimo was covered in blood. He could not help but grunt and stagger, almost falling. The difference was way too great. This was not just a difference in strength. It was a difference on two different levels, the difference between heaven and earth. There was no need for Xuan Yudaoren to attack. Su Zimo could not withstand the might of a void reversion alone. The little fox was scared silly. Just now, she was protected in Su Zimo's embrace the entire time. Su Zimo used his body to block all the damage for her. Su Zimo's back was facing Xuan Yudaoren and he was still fleeing. There was a strong stench of blood in his panting and blood froth in his mouth. However, his gaze was unusually resolute and ferocious. Xuan Yudaoren stood in the air with his hands behind his back, looking down at Su Zimo who was fleeing for his life on the ground. His gaze was filled with mockery and cruelty, as though he was looking at an ant struggling to survive. Mr. Mo, when he saw that, Mu Dongqing wanted to say something but stopped. Who would have thought that the #1 weapon refinement master of Great Zhou would have such an identity and possess such terrifying combat strength? A few years ago, Su Zimo helped him refine a supreme-grade spirit weapon in the capital of Great Zhou. At that time, he was still a little inexperienced. But now, that seemingly scrawny young man had already reached this stage. What was regrettable was that this scholar was about to die. What a pity, sigh. After a long silence, Mu Dongqing let out a long sigh and lamented. No matter what, Su Zimo had helped him before. Mu Dongqing could not bear to see Su Zimo end up in such a state. Bai Yuhan seemed to have thought of something as she whispered with a conflicted expression, if she finds out about young Master Su's death, the third princess will probably be heartbroken. Mu Dongqing lamented, humans can't win against fate at the end of the day. Even a void reversion has appeared. It's also because of this calamity in his life that he can't escape death. In midair, Xuan Yudaoren seemed to have lost his patience to joke around as he harumphed coldly. Suddenly, he descended and blocked Su Zimo's path. Right then, a change happened. Chapter 574. Su Zimo did not stop in his tracks and a moon-white bow suddenly appeared in his hands. The black gold arrow was already knocked. The bow was like a full moon. Moon concealment bow, black gold arrow. That was the strongest attack that Su Zimo could release in his current state. So what if he was a void reversion? There was no way Su Zimo was going to allow himself to be captured. It was impossible for him to escape right under the noses of a void reversion. Unless he could kill the other party. The moon concealment bow shone brightly and endless spirit chi surged into Su Zimo's embrace, as though he was hugging a bright full moon. The black gold arrow emitted a cold killing intent, almost fusing with the full moon in his embrace. Bam! The black gold arrow shot out. The two of them were way too close. The black gold arrow arrived instantly. Even if Su Zimo and Xuan Yudaoren were in each other's shoes, it would be difficult for them to dodge that arrow. Xuan Yudaoren did not move at all, as though he did not see the cold glint before him, and a look of mockery flashed through his eyes. Is that all you've got? Xuan Yudaoren raised his palm. Although his movements seemed slow, it seemed as though he had crossed through the void and blocked the black gold arrow. His palm was sparkling like jade and shone with a mysterious glow. His fingernails were long and flawless like glass. Xuan Yudaoren flicked his finger gently. Clang! The sound of metal clashing could be heard. Right in front of countless gazes, the arrow that could kill Pei Chunyu instantly was repelled by Xuan Yudaoren's finger. There was no injury on his finger at all. It was so casual. Su Zimo's pupils constricted and his heart sank. It was way too scary. The strength of a void reversion had far exceeded his imagination. The difference between the two of them was way too great, akin to clouds and mud. A vicious glint flashed through Su Zimo's eyes as he suddenly extended his right arm without stopping in his tracks. His right hand, which possessed the divine phoenix bone, was clenched into a fist. Without any fancy moves, he smashed it viciously towards Xuan Yudaoren's head. The black gold arrow was the first thing Su Zimo had prepared. It was only to confuse Xuan Yudaoren and make him lower his guard. The true killing move was the divine phoenix bone at the back. With Xuan Yudaoren's cultivation, he would not dodge Reverend Jean Dan's attack. He would only take it head-on. That way, he would have a chance to activate the power of the divine phoenix bone. Su Zimo believed that once the power of the divine phoenix bone exploded, even if it could not kill Xuan Yudaoren, it would be enough to injure him. This might be his only chance at survival. The mockery in Xuan Yudaoren's eyes deepened. A trapped beast will still fight. Xuan Yudaoren sneered. As Su Zimo had expected, he extended his palm and clenched it into a fist as well, welcoming Su Zimo's right fist. Su Zimo's eyes shone with a ferocious glint. His inner core and Jean Dan circulated furiously and his blood chi surged. His tendons and bones rang in unison, rumbling like thunder. His organs shuddered and his divine orifices shone with a demonic light. A blood-red halo formed around his head. Su Zimo squeezed out all the power in his body and gathered it on his right hand. Success or failure depended on this single move. When the two fists were about to collide, Xuan Yudaoren sneered and suddenly changed his stance. His fist turned into a palm and he did not choose to take Su Zimo head-on. Xuan Yudaoren's palm swiped upwards gently and dodged the incoming fist. It arrived at Su Zimo's right wrist and gripped tightly. Su Zimo's body was forced to stop. A tremendous rebound force surged into his body and Su Zimo felt as though his bones were about to fall apart. Ugh! Su Zimo's expression changed and he grunted. Xuan Yudaoren's palm gripped his wrist tightly like a golden hoop. The tremendous strength almost crushed his right wrist. It was way too painful. Su Zimo shuddered and grit his teeth. Instantly, bean-sized beads of sweat rolled down his face. With a cold expression, Xuan Yudaoren raised his chin slightly and looked down at Su Zimo from above, mocking, "You want to use your divine phoenix bone to kill me? Fufu." Xuan Yudaoren chuckled gently and shook his head. "You're way too naive." The difference between the two of them was not only in terms of cultivation realm or strength. In terms of experience and mental strength, Su Zimo was completely disadvantaged. Xuan Yudaoren had already guessed Su Zimo's intentions and chose not to take the divine phoenix bone head-on. Instead, he gripped Su Zimo's wrist. Su Zimo had the divine phoenix bone in his right hand that was indestructible. However, his wrist was incomparably fragile against the power of a void reversion. Xuan Yudaoren's change in moves severed Su Zimo's final hope. Enduring the pain in his wrist, Su Zimo grit his teeth and glared at Xuan Yudaoren indignantly. The divine phoenix bone. Suddenly, Xuan Yudaoren lamented, "An ant like you isn't worthy of possessing such a divine item. From this day forth, the divine phoenix bone is mine." Before he finished his sentence, Xuan Yudaoren exerted strength in his palm. Snap! The ear-piercing sound of bones cracking could be heard. Su Zimo's wrist was snapped by Xuan Yudaoren. His right hand drooped limply and was only connected by skin and flesh. Many cultivators felt their teeth ache at the sight. As though he could not feel the pain, Su Zimo did not make a single sound. However, his body trembled slightly and his facial features were contorted and deformed. Su Zimo narrowed his gaze and his expression was extremely cold. Xuan Yudaoren ignored the hatred in Su Zimo's eyes and said indifferently, "Little beast, Pei Chunyu is my grandson. Since you've harmed his life, I'll make sure you live in pain and torment for the rest of your life. Severing your wrist is only the beginning." Xuan Yudaoren's voice was like a malevolent ghost from hell that sent chills down one's spine. Bang! Suddenly, Xuan Yudaoren extended his leg and tapped Su Zimo's dantian gently. That kick was way too fast. Even if Su Zimo was in his peak condition, he would not be able to dodge it, let alone the fact that he was severely injured and his spirit energy was depleted. Furthermore, Xuan Yudaoren's palm was still gripping Su Zimo's injured right wrist the entire time. There was no way Su Zimo could escape at all. That kick seemed light as it landed on Su Zimo's dantian, but it contained a terrifying amount of power. Like a gigantic spear, it pierced Su Zimo's dantian viciously. Su Zimo shuddered and felt a piercing pain in his abdomen, nearly fainting. His dantian was mangled and a bloody hole appeared. It was crippled. Su Zimo could clearly sense that his Jin Dan was shattered into pieces by Xuan Yudoran's kick. His spirit energy dissipated rapidly. In the blink of an eye, his dantian was empty without any spirit energy left. Su Zimo's body twitched and he could barely stand. His face was pale and his eyes were dull while his aura was weak. His cultivation was crippled. The Jin Dan was the source of perfected being Jin Dan's strength. Once it was shattered, there was no way it could be recovered. Dozens of years of tough cultivation were destroyed in a single day. For cultivators, there was nothing crueler than having their Jin Dan destroyed and their cultivation crippled. The surroundings were silent. Many perfected being Jin Dan had different expressions. Some were gloating, some were sighing internally while some looked pained. Mu Dongqing and Bai Yuhan were acquainted with Su Zimo and could not bear to watch at that moment. Dugu Jian lowered his head and shook his head gently with a look of pity in his eyes. No matter how monstrous and dazzling Su Zimo was in the past, even cultivating to the extreme foundation establishment realm and having twin phenomenons, everything was gone the moment his Jin Dan was shattered. Chapter 575. Su Zimo was already drenched in sweat and his head was lowered. Beneath his black hair, one could vaguely make out a pair of frighteningly bright eyes. Even though his Jin Dan was shattered and his cultivation was crippled, Su Zimo did not despair. As long as he could escape today, he would definitely take revenge in the future. Even though his Jin Dan was shattered, he still had his inner core. For the past 8 years, Su Zimo cultivated the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness day and night. The inner core that he condensed was the essence of the first 7 sections of the mystic classic. With the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness, he could still look down on those of the same cultivation realm. Xuanyu Daoren gripped Su Zimo's broken wrist with a cold gaze. Looking at the silent Su Zimo with his head lowered, he suddenly said, "Oh, right. I almost forgot that you're half a demon and you've even cultivated an inner core." The existence of the inner core could not be hidden from Xuanyu Daoren's spirit consciousness. "Is that what you're relying on?" Xuanyu Daoren laughed menacingly and said slowly, "Even if you're perfected Jin Dan, I'm not going to give you any chances. I'm going to let you experience true despair." The moment he said that, Xuanyu Daoren extended his right fist. Bang! Xuanyu Daoren's right fist smashed heavily against Su Zimo's chest. A tremendous amount of power surged into his body and struck the mystic gold silk armor on the outside first. That connate defensive spirit weapon could not defend against the power released by Xuanyu Daoren and a hole was punched through it, causing all 6 spirit patterns to dissipate. After shattering the connate defensive spirit weapon, the remaining power continued to strike Su Zimo's body. Crack! 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 The sound of bones cracking could be heard. Blood drained from Su Zimo's face as his body was tossed into the air before falling heavily. Cracks appeared on his inner core one after another. Su Zimo could no longer sense any demonic power. His inner core was completely out of his control as well. Su Zimo's face turned even paler. After suffering such a severe blow to his inner core, even if it wasn't completely crippled, the chances of him recovering in the future were extremely slim. In fact, Xuanyu Daoren's punch was intended to shatter Su Zimo's inner core into pieces. However, the mystic gold silk armor blocked the majority of the power. Furthermore, Su Zimo's tendons, bones, blood and flesh were extremely frightening to begin with. That was the reason why his inner core was not penetrated by the punch. Before this, Xuanyu Daoren had been holding Su Zimo's right wrist. Only now did he feel that the situation had been settled. Did he relax and release his hand. Xuanyu Daoren had been cultivating for thousands of years. Even his eyelashes were empty. He would not make a mistake, and he would not give Su Zimo any chance. The little fox was scared out of her wits the entire time. She had never witnessed such cruel methods and had been hiding behind Su Zimo the entire time. It was only at this moment that she realized something and shrieked. No matter how cowardly she was, she could not watch on helplessly as Su Zimo was humiliated as such. Shoo! The little fox tossed the fire-blocking basket in her hands. The fire-blocking basket continued to expand in midair. 9 beams of golden light shone dazzlingly, bursting forth with boundless killing intent. The fiery light flourished and shone down on priest Xianyu. A look of surprise flashed through Xuanyu Daoren's eyes. Against the incoming fire-blocking basket that was filled with endless flames, Xuanyu Daoren did not dodge or avoid. Suddenly, he reached out with both hands and scooped in midair. Although the terrifying flames landed on Xuanyu Daoren's body, they could not even scratch his skin. After piercing through the flames, Xuanyu Daoren's arms were unscathed. He took down the fire-blocking basket and examined it carefully. The glint in Xuanyu Daoren's eyes turned brighter as he nodded to himself. A moment later, he placed the fire-blocking basket into his storage bag. This is a good treasure. However, it's a pity that you're too weak and can't unleash the full power of the fire-blocking basket. From now on, it's mine. Hia! Hia! The little fox had a furious expression. This was the last thing her mother left for her and she could not afford to lose it. Don't go. Su Zimo's voice was hoarse and unpleasant to the ears, sounding weak. However, it was a pity that the little fox was distracted by the fire-blocking basket. Even if she heard Su Zimo's advice, it was already too late. The little fox charged forward. Initially, Xuanyu Daoren wanted to kill her casually. However, his heart skipped a beat. Fox race? A vague desire flashed through Xuanyu Daoren's eyes as he changed his mind and waved his hand. Bang! The little fox was sent flying and fell into the mud. She spat out a mouthful of blood and her eyes were filled with fear. She had not formed a core and could not even transform. She was no match for Xuanyu Daoren at all. Little thing, it's as easy as flipping my hand if I want to kill you. It's just a thought. Xuanyu Daoren said coldly, from this day forth, you're my slave. If you dare to disobey me, I'll make sure you suffer. Foxes were all natural seductresses. If he could have a fox as his slave and do whatever he wanted to her, he would definitely live like an immortal. The little fox was severely injured to begin with and was feeling uneasy. Now that she heard Xuanyu Daoren's words, there was no way she was unaware of her fate. Instantly, she fainted in a fit of rage. Xuanyu Daoren was indifferent. He had a lot of time to slowly train this fox in the future. Xuanyu Daoren's gaze shifted to the bloodied cultivator not far away. Their gazes met. Xuanyu Daoren furrowed his brows slightly. He had to admit that even in such a situation, he still could not see any intention of yielding in Su Zimo's eyes. There were way too many forces in this world that could take down Su Zimo. However, there was not a single force that could make him submit. Xuanyu Daoren furrowed his brows slightly. Su Zimo's gaze made him feel extremely uncomfortable. It was as though something was out of his control. That's impossible. Xuanyu Daoren lamented internally, this lad's Jin Dan is crippled and his inner core is shattered. He's already a complete cripple and there's no way anything can happen to him. Little beast, why aren't you running anymore, Xuanyu Daoren sneered. Su Zimo said nothing. Xuanyu Daoren's voice was erratic as he continued, don't worry, I won't let you die so easily. I'll imprison you and torture you bit by bit. The secret of the divine phoenix bone, the secret of dual immortality and demonic cultivation, you have way too many secrets. Su Zimo smiled as well. I'm afraid you won't have the chance to know my secrets. One after another, strange sutras flowed through Su Zimo's heart. Poof! Su Zimo's heart almost exploded as his bloodline boiled and burned. In the blink of an eye, almost a third of it was burned. It was the blood escape technique of the fiend's sects. Even if his Jin Dan was crippled, his inner core was shattered, his spirit energy dissipated and his demonic energy was depleted, Su Zimo had another type of power within his body, the power of bloodline. Once he released blood escape, Su Zimo's speed would increase exponentially for a short period of time. Even so, it would be a fool's dream if he wanted to escape from the eyes of a void reversion. Otherwise, Su Zimo would have released blood escape a long time ago and escaped from this place without having to wait until he had nowhere to run. Right now, he only had a single motive for releasing blood escape, to head to the Dragon Burial Valley. Chapter 576. Su Zimo released blood escape and turned to flee without hesitation. Passing by the little fox, Su Zimo reached out and scooped up the unconscious little fox, hugging her in his embrace as he sprinted with all his might. Su Zimo did not dare to imagine what would happen to the little fox if he abandoned her here. That might be even scarier than death. Su Zimo's figure transformed into a streak of blood light and sped into the distance. All the paragons were dumbfounded. Su Zimo was already a cripple on his last breath who could not even stand properly. In the blink of an eye, a cripple like him burst forth with such terrifying speed. Even Xuan Yudaoren was stunned, let alone the many perfected beings Jin Dan who were watching. Although he was a void reversion and was 2 major cultivation realms higher than Su Zimo, he was extremely cautious. He only released Su Zimo's wrist after he shattered Su Zimo's Jin Dan and inner core. However, Xuan Yudaoren truly did not expect that Su Zimo would still have the strength to escape. Blood escape. Xuan Yudaoren's gaze flickered as he recognized the origin of the secret skill instantly. Blood escape was a secret skill of the Shura sect of the Fiend's sects and was extremely famous in the cultivation world. Its burst speed was shocking and was far above the 5 elements. How naive. You're thinking of escaping in front of me? Xuan Yudaoren scoffed coldly, let's see how long you can escape for. Before he finished his sentence, Xuan Yudaoren chased after him in a flash. He was even faster than Su Zimo who had released blood escape. If Su Zimo was facing Jining Jinjuan's pursuit, he might have been able to escape with his life if he released blood escape. Unfortunately, he was facing a void reversion. Furthermore, he was a glass palace cultivator, a top expert of the void reversion realm. Right now, the fleeing Su Zimo was like an ant struggling in the eyes of Xuan Yudaoren. The distance between the two of them was closing rapidly. If not for the fact that Su Zimo had escaped first, Xuan Yudaoren would have caught up to Su Zimo within dozens of breaths. Many perfected beings Jin Dan hurriedly followed. However, everyone's speed was far inferior to Su Zimo who had released blood escape and Xuan Yudaoren. Thankfully, there were no obstructions in front of them. The paragons chased as they watched. Xuan Yu Zimo in Xuan Yudaoren. That's right. Even if he uses the blood escape technique, he's still barely hanging on. He won't be able to escape death. As long as I can live, I'll live as long as possible. Mu Dongqing and Bai Yuhan had conflicted expressions when they heard the discussions around them. No matter what, Su Zimo was a cultivator of Great Zhou after all. Both of them were acquainted with him in the past. The two of them were not as relaxed as the others when they saw Su Zimo in such a state. After chasing for a while more, Mu Dongqing suddenly exclaimed softly and frowned, murmuring softly, something's amiss in this direction. It seems like, could it be, it's the Dragon Burial Valley. Some cultivators in the crowd also noticed something amiss and exclaimed. In the catastrophe 10,000 years ago, emperors and patriarchs died in the Dragon Burial Valley and divine dragons were buried. It was an ominous place. For the past 10,000 years, countless experts had entered the Dragon Burial Valley to investigate. However, none of them were heard from nor returned. It was said that even the Dharma Dao Jun and conjoint body mighty figures could not return alive after entering. Among them, there was no lack of monstrous geniuses and peerless experts who had been famous for a long time. In fact, some people even listed the Dragon Burial Valley as the 10th forbidden ground outside of the 9. Suddenly, the Paragon's guessed Su Zimo's intentions. Since he knew that he was going to die, he might as well jump into the Dragon Burial Valley and let Xuanyu Daoren obtain nothing. In midair, Xuanyu Daoren's expression darkened. It was clear that he could tell what Su Zimo's intentions were as well. Xuanyu Daoren's blood qi surged and his dermic powers surged. His speed was already at its limits and there was even a buzzing sound in the void. The vermilion fruit grew in the depths of the Great Qian ruins to begin with and was extremely close to the Dragon Burial Valley. Now that Su Zimo had released Blood Escape and Xuanyu Daoren was sprinting at full speed, the two of them arrived at the Dragon Burial Valley one after another. Not far ahead, there was a gigantic ravine that split the Great Qian ruins into two. The ravine was dark and deep with a sinister wind that emitted a shuddering aura. Looking down from the skies, it looked like a massive creature with its mouth wide open, ready to devour food that was delivered to *its doorstep. ****, how dare you? Xuanyu Daoren could not help but holler anxiously. If Su Zimo were to truly jump into the Dragon Burial Valley, his losses would be way too great. The divine phoenix bone and the secret of dual immortality and demonic cultivation would all be buried in the Dragon Burial Valley with Su Zimo's leap. Arriving at the edge of the Dragon Burial Valley, Su Zimo looked down and felt his head spin. His injuries were way too severe. His Jin Dan was destroyed and his inner core was shattered. After a series of intense battles and the release of Blood Escape, he was already at his limits both physically and mentally. There was a hint of struggle in Su Zimo's eyes. At the end of the day, he was indignant at the thought of dying just like that. However, if he were to continue being humiliated and end up in the hands of Xuanyu Daoren, he might as well jump down from here and end everything once and for all. Forget it, Su Zimo sighed internally. ****. Su Zimo. In a hurry, Xuanyu Daoren corrected himself. Su Zimo stood at the edge of the Dragon Burial Valley, swaying as though a gust of wind could knock him down. Xuanyu Daoren did not dare to approach him at all. Su Zimo, you don't have to do this, Xuanyu Daoren said in a deep voice, we can make a deal. As long as you hand the divine phoenix bone to me, we can forget about our feud. With his back facing the Dragon Burial Valley, Su Zimo looked at Xuanyu Daoren mockingly. Xuanyu Daoren cursed internally but forced a smile on his face. Don't worry, I'm a man of my words. As long as you're willing to hand over the divine phoenix bone, I'll leave immediately and not hurt you. You want the divine phoenix bone? Sure, Su Zimo smiled and leaped backwards, falling into the Dragon Burial Valley as he said indifferently, come down and take it. You? Enraged, Xuanyu Daoren disappeared from the spot in a flash. In the blink of an eye, he arrived at the edge of the Dragon Burial Valley and stopped hurriedly. Xuanyu Daoren wanted to reach out his sleeves and pull Su Zimo up, but it was too late. He watched as Su Zimo fell into the darkness and vanished completely. 10,000 years ago, a few emperors of the human race joined forces and engaged in a great battle against the divine dragon, resulting in the formation of this gigantic rift valley. Not only was the divine dragon buried in the rift valley, it was also filled with many terrifying powers that were mixed together. Even dermic weapons would be reduced to dust if they fell in, let alone the bodies of cultivators. Xuanyu Daoren did not dare to head down and could only watch as the divine phoenix bone disappeared before his eyes. ****, do you think that's the end? Since you killed my grandson, I'll destroy your Su family and leave no one alive. Xuanyu Daoren's gaze was menacing and his expression was frighteningly dark. Chapter 577. Su Zimo leaped. His figure disappeared completely into the Dragon Burial Valley. That was the scene that greeted the paragons when they arrived at the Dragon Burial Valley. Everyone could not conceal the shock in their eyes with conflicted expressions. That leap meant that the monster incarnate of Divine Phoenix Island was a thing of the past forever. Fallen geniuses would eventually be forgotten. Even if that person was a dragon or phoenix among geniuses. That person had way too many secrets and could even break through the boundaries of the human and demon races to cultivate at the same time. In the elementary ancient battlefield, that person once swept through the paragons of the immortal, Buddhist and fiend sects single-handedly, killing sealers and entering the human emperor's palace. That person was the second cultivator after the human emperor to unlock 9 spirit meridians and cultivate to the extreme foundation establishment realm. That person cultivated an extremely rare double phenomenon, and both of them were primordial phenomenons that had been lost for a long time. During the fight for the vermilion fruit in the Great Qian ruins, that person obtained the vermilion fruit domineeringly despite being surrounded by the paragons of the North region. He killed countless paragons and even killed the number 1 perfected being of the North region, Shibuya. That person incinerated hundreds of Jining Jinjuan with a single flame and stained the voids with blood. That person escaped from the pursuit of void reversions even after his Jin Dan was destroyed and his inner core was shattered. He leaped into the Dragon Burial Valley and left behind many legends that bordered on miracles. Su Zimo, the number 1 monster incarnate of history, died in the Dragon Burial Valley just like that. Everything was over. Nobody expected that the fight for the vermilion fruit and the battle of the paragons would end in such a manner. The Dragon Burial Valley is an ominous place. Could that person's death have something to do with it as well? He's not the only one. There are way too many paragons of the North region who died in this battle. It's probably because of the ominous Dragon Burial Valley. The fact that we're still alive can be considered as survivors of a calamity. The paragons discussed softly with lingering fear and did not dare to approach the Dragon Burial Valley. Mu Dongqing and Bai Yuhan retreated from the crowd silently. We've got to inform the 3rd princess about this as soon as possible. Mu Dongqing said darkly. Bai Yuhan frowned and said, you can also tell the relationship between the 3rd princess and Su Zimo. If she knew about this, she would probably be heartbroken. Sigh, I can't bear it. This is not a matter of whether or not I have the heart to do so. Mu Dongqing said calmly, there's no way we can keep it a secret. The 3rd princess will find out about it sooner or later. I understand. Bai Yuhan nodded and sighed softly. Mu Dongqing took out a spirit crane from his storage bag and described everything that had happened in detail before releasing the spirit crane. A few days later. Great Zhou Imperial City, Rain Admiration Pavilion. After the spring rain, there were a few drops of sparkling and translucent water droplets on the lotus leaves and the green bamboos by the shore, sparkling and translucent. The 2 women stood in front of the window and looked at the beautiful scenery outside. They chuckled softly, and their voices were extremely pleasant to hear. Both of them were peerless beauties, like fairies from the heavenly palace. One of them was dignified and elegant, wearing a pale yellow robe. She had a noble aura between her brows and exuded a hint of authority. The other was charming and wore a pink dress. When she smiled faintly, her eyes curved into crescent moons. Elder sister, congratulations to royal father for passing the throne to you. The girl in pink smiled and tilted her head as she spoke in a cheeky manner. The elegant woman shook her head. There's nothing to congratulate. I'm a woman after all. There will be many people who will object to me inheriting the throne. What's there to be afraid of? You have father's support. The girl in pink waved her fist. The elegant woman did not reply and looked into the distance, deep in thought. A long time later, the elegant woman said, actually, the reason why father is passing the throne to me is all because of one person. I know, it's young Master Su. The girl in pink blinked and giggled. Yes. The elegant woman nodded. Zimo is at Extreme Foundation Establishment and is the second strongest human emperor. Father and the seniors of Great Zhou have high hopes for his potential. Furthermore, I have some ties with Zimo, so, the girl in pink could not help but tease, sister, your relationship with young Master Su isn't as simple as just some ties. In my opinion, the two of you are a couple, hee. Lass, you're the only one who knows. The elegant woman rolled her eyes at the girl in pink coquettishly. The two peerless beauties in the Rain Admiration Pavilion were none other than Ji Yaoxue and Demoness Ji. Right then, a spirit light flashed in the distance and made a turn in midair, flying towards Ji Yaoxue of the Rain Admiration Pavilion. Ji Yaoxue frowned and murmured, "It's a spirit crane." What happened? Ji Yaoxue reached out with her jade-white hands and received the spirit crane gently. When she opened it for a look, she froze on the spot and her face turned pale. A moment later, Ji Yaoxue's body swayed and she nearly fainted. Hurriedly, she held onto the windowsill of the Rain Admiration Pavilion and exerted strength in her fingers, digging her nails deep into the wooden frame. Demoness Ji hurried forward to support Ji Yaoxue. I'm fine, Ji Yaoxue shook her head gently. Although she could still stand, there was an unresolvable sorrow in the depths of her eyes. Sister, don't be anxious, out of curiosity, Demoness Ji leaned forward to take a look. What? Demoness Ji could not help but exclaim when she saw the words on the spirit crane. The news on the spirit crane was one more explosive than the other. The final sentence was clearly stated that Su Zimo's cultivation was destroyed and he leaped into the Dragon Burial Valley. Void Reversions of Glass Palace declared that they were going to destroy the Su family and leave no one alive. Leaping into the Dragon Burial Valley was no different from dying. Instantly, Demoness Ji's eyes were filled with a layer of mist. In the cultivation world, she was known as Demoness Ji who charmed the world. However, most of the time, she was still a young girl. Ji Yaoxue closed her eyes, her face expressionless. A long time later, Ji Yaoxue opened her eyes. With a resolute expression, she withdrew a spirit crane and wrote a few words on it. Hurry and protect the king of Yen, Su Hong, and bring him out of Yen country. If Su Hong refuses, you can use force at the critical moment. Handle this personally and don't let anyone else know about it. You must keep it a secret. Otherwise, your life will be in danger. With that said, Ji Yaoxue released the spirit crane without hesitation. The spirit crane flapped and disappeared into the horizons with a flash of spirit light. Ji Yaoxue already had the aura of an emperor who ruled over the world. Demoness Ji was not in the mood to linger in the palace. Wiping away her tears secretly, she turned and ran outside. She wanted to confirm with Gu Shi personally whether the news was true or false. A few days later, news spread out from the Great Qian ruins one after another. The fight for the vermilion fruit, the battle royale of the paragons, the monster incarnate of Divine Phoenix Island and Su Zimo, the entire north region was shaken. The cultivation world of Tianhuang mainland was greatly affected. For a moment, almost all the cultivators were discussing the battle in the Great Qian ruins and the number one monster incarnate of history who had already fallen and become a thing of the past. Chapter 578. Misty Peak. The entire sect fell silent when the news of Su Zimo's death in the Dragon Burial Valley spread. Xian Yi and the other two had only been separated from Su Zimo for slightly more than a month. To think that they would be separated by life and death now. It did not matter how the cultivators outside viewed Su Zimo, whether they called him a demon with an unchanging wild nature or a fiend with a murderous nature. In the hearts of Xian Yi and the others, Su Zimo would forever be a disciple of Misty Peak. In the Battle of Dongling Valley, in order to protect his fellow sect members, he did not hesitate to use himself as bait to lure everyone from Blood Crow Palace away at the risk of dying. In the sect competition, he shone brightly and soared into the skies in front of everyone with an intimidating aura, causing all the sects and cultivators who were waiting to mock Misty Peak to shut their mouths forever. In the Great Qian Ruins, he single-handedly defeated the powerful enemies of the three sects and protected the safety of Xian Yi and the other two, allowing them to return with a full load. As a result, the disheveled old man's injuries were healed as well. He was the #1 weapon refinement master of Great Zhou. He was at Extreme Foundation establishment and was the second human emperor. His potential was limitless and even the emperor viewed him in a different light. Misty Peak was proud of him. Unfortunately, everything vanished with Su Zimo's leap. Lu Hui sighed gently. Xuanyu Daoren declared that he wanted to destroy the Su family. Given his void reversion cultivation and glass palace's background, the Su family is most likely doomed. Mortals should not be implicated in the grudges between cultivators. To think that an immortal sect like Glass Palace would do something as despicable as that. What a *T immortal sect. How despicable. The disheveled old man cursed hatefully. Xian Yi said darkly, I'm guessing that Xuanyu Daoren wouldn't take action personally against a mortal given his status. Even so, there was no sect or faction in the North region that dared to protect the Su family. It wasn't just because of Xuanyu Daoren and the Valurium Palace. It was also because Su Zimo's identity was far too sensitive. Furthermore, during the Battle of the Cinnabar Fruit, he had killed too many geniuses of the Northern Domain and incinerated over 100 Jinying Zhenjuan. He had offended almost all of the major sects and factions in the Northern Domain. Whoever dared to protect the Su family would be going against the entire Northern region. The Great Zhou dynasty did not dare to do so. Misty Peak didn't dare either. Once this matter was exposed, a calamity would befall him in an instant. To be fair, the fact that Ethereal Peak did not draw a line with Su Zimo at such a critical juncture was already a huge pressure on them. Patriarch Lingyun released his spirit consciousness and scanned his surroundings before whispering, Senior Crane has already left the mountain for Yen country. I hope she's not too late. This matter is of great importance and must not be leaked out. Otherwise, the sect will be exterminated. Xian Yi and the others hurriedly nodded. At this moment, a powerful and familiar aura rushed over from not far away. The old immortal Crane had returned. Everyone from Misty Peak was invigorated. The old immortal Crane pushed the door open and entered, unable to conceal her fatigue. Surveying her surroundings, she sighed softly. I was late. When they heard that, everyone from Misty Peak felt their hearts skip a beat. The old immortal Crane said, Xian Yu did not reveal himself due to his status. He sent a group of dozens of Glass Palace disciples to the capital of Yen country, but the king of Yen, Su Hong, is nowhere to be found. Everyone from Misty Peak heaved a sigh of relief, but they were puzzled. Su Hong's whereabouts were unknown. As long as he did not fall into the hands of Glass Palace, he would be safe for the time being. Why did the old immortal Crane say that she was late? Why was there a deep sense of sorrow in her tone as well? The old immortal Crane continued, Glass Palace found nothing and was enraged. In order to force Su Hong to appear, they ordered for the city to be massacred. Everyone's mouths were agape with disbelief in their eyes. Their expressions were sorrowful and they could not recover from their shock for a long time. Massacring the entire city, these two short words, yet they sounded so heavy right now. Almost everyone in the capital of Yen country were mortals. In the face of the immense strength of cultivators, those mortals could not defend against them and their lives were akin to ants. Even though they did not witness it personally, everyone from Misty Peak could imagine the despair and helplessness those mortals felt against cultivators. It was as though everyone could hear the tragic cries. They could almost see countless pairs of frail arms struggling. The old immortal Crane closed her eyes and sighed, as though she could not bear to recall, by the time I arrived, Yen City was filled with rivers of blood and mountains of corpses. It was a scene of devastation that resembled hell. The disheveled old man grit his teeth and spat out, Beast. Are they really not afraid of being punished by the heavens for the grudges of cultivators and causing such a massacre? Lu Hui's voice was trembling. There's no such thing as heavenly punishment in this world, Xian Yi laughed mockingly. The old immortal crane continued, after more than half of the city was massacred, cultivators of the fiend's sects arrived. Their leader was the pure maiden of the fiend's sects and they fought a huge battle against Glass Palace before they were forced to retreat. In that case, there's a high chance that pure maiden sect was the one who rescued Su Hong. That should be the case. Thankfully, the fiend's sects appeared. Otherwise, the mortals in Yen City, everyone from Misty Peak discussed, but their voices came to an abrupt stop. Everyone went silent. The immortal sects were the ones who killed, but the fiend's sects were the ones who saved. It had to be said that this was truly ironic. Who was the immortal and who was the fiend? Right from the beginning, Misty Peak's foundation was to slay demons and protect the masses. But now, when the words "thankfully, the fiend's sects appeared" were said, everyone's beliefs in the past were gradually crumbling. Su Zimo was a demonic cultivator. Were they going to kill Su Zimo? The fiend's sects had already saved the masses. Were they going to slay the fiend's sects as well? The former disciple of Misty Peak, Yen Beichen, was a fiend. Furthermore, he was the greatest fiend of all fiends, Shura. However, Yen Beichen had once said that he had killed countless people in his life but he had never killed a single mortal. Shura was a killing god but he did not kill indiscriminately. Compared to everyone from Glass Palace, a fiend as such was many times more powerful. After a moment of silence, just as everyone thought that the matter was over, the old immortal crane pursed her lips and took a deep breath before continuing. Everyone from Glass Palace retreated but they were indignant. In order to vent their anger, they massacred 13 cities along the way. What? Everyone from Misty Peak was shocked. Within a single day, countless people in the territory of Yen country lost their homes and their families. The death toll alone is more than 30 million. No natural disaster would be as terrifying as this. True disasters were all man-made. Xian Yi gripped his fists and said coldly, even if Glass Palace is an immortal sect, aren't they afraid of incurring the wrath of the entire cultivation world by killing the innocent? They have sufficient reasons. The old immortal crane shook her head with a look of mockery in her eyes. Glass Palace declared that the appearance of the pure maiden sect of the fiend sects in Yen country proves that Yen country is colluding with the fiend sections. The mortals of Yen country have long fallen into the fiend path. Glass Palace is slaying demons and defending the righteous path. Everyone from Misty Peak felt a sense of helplessness surge through their hearts and their chests felt stuffy. That reason sounded so laughable and ridiculous. Everyone knew that Glass Palace massacred mortals because they were indignant and were trying to vent their anger. However, nobody could refute that. That was how the world worked, strength reigned supreme. Everyone from Misty Peak knew the ins and outs of everything and knew that the mortals of Yen country were innocent. However, how many of them could truly see the truth? There were probably countless mortals in other vassal states and other corners who were unaware of the truth and applauded in gratitude that immortals had appeared to eliminate demons and defend the righteous path for them. Mortals at the bottom of society were the easiest to deceive and fool. Chapter 579. It had been a month since the Paragon Battle of the Great Qian Ruins. The news had spread through almost the entire Tianhuang mainland and everyone knew about it. Middle Continent, Elixir Yang Sect. A man and two women stood in a rather grand cave abode. The man had decent features and a calm expression. He was the former disciple of Misty Peak, Ji Qingtian. Of the two women, one of them wore white robes and was extremely beautiful. However, she exuded a faint coldness. The other woman was extremely handsome and had a picturesque appearance. However, she was dressed as a man and looked like a suave young master. The two women were Leng Ro, who had joined Chiguramon, and Tang Yu of Elixir Yang Sect. The three of them faced each other in silence. The atmosphere in the cave abode was a little tense. Heis. A long time later, Ji Qingtian sighed gently and asked, "Has the news been confirmed? Did junior brother Su truly jump into the Dragon Burial Valley?" "Yes," Tang Yu nodded. "Many people witnessed this personally. It can't be fake." Leng Ro remained silent the entire time and her gaze turned colder. Ji Qingtian shook his head and sighed emotionally. "This matter has blown up." Tang Yu pursed her lips with a conflicted expression as she looked into the distance and murmured, "So, you're the monster incarnate of Divine Phoenix Island." No wonder, back in the ancient battlefield, Tang Yu had a moment of doubt when news of the monster incarnate of Divine Phoenix Island spread. After all, there were some similarities between Su Zimo and the monster incarnate of Divine Phoenix Island. However, she denied it secretly later on. The differences between the two of them were way too obvious. Tang Yu recalled everything that happened in the ancient battlefield and felt sad. Although the two of them had not spent much time together, she was still secretly looking forward to their next meeting. But now, all her hopes had turned into bubbles. "Does Xiaoning know about this?" Ji Qingtian suddenly asked. "She does." Tang Yu said. She locked herself up without eating or drinking for an entire day. Thankfully, she has the night spirit by her side. At the very least, she's not in any danger. In another cave abode, Xiao Ning curled her legs and leaned against the wall. Her eyes were red and swollen as she sobbed softly. The night spirit quietly stood guard at the side. His eyes revealed a hint of worry. Then, as if it had thought of something, the killing intent in its eyes surged. Western regions. In the depths of the desert. Beside a tomb, a fatty sat in a daze, muttering softly, "Big brother, why did you leave just like that?" Little fatty sat beside the tomb, wailing like a child. North region, Great Qian ruins. On this day, two uninvited guests came to the ruins. They looked exhausted. One of them was very tall, at least 2 meters tall. His limbs were long and slender, and his hands hung down naturally, reaching past his knees. The tall man held a long staff in his hand. His eyes were fierce and there was a hint of red light in them. The other person was barehanded. Although he was a little shorter, his body looked stronger and sturdier. Both of them had extremely long and heavy body hair. Although they were in human form, the demonic qi they exuded could not be concealed at all. 2 demons. If Su Zimo was here, he would definitely be able to recognize that the 2 men were Monkey and Linghu who had been missing for many years. Monkey barged into the depths of the ruins with a long staff in hand and broke through the encirclement of the otherworldly soldiers, charging straight for the Dragon Burial Valley. Linghu supported from behind, repelling the otherworldly soldiers that rushed up from behind. After not seeing each other for more than a year, Monkey and Linghu had already formed their inner cores. Not only did their cultivation realms not fall, their combat strength was rather frightening as well. It was especially the case for Monkey. No otherworldly soldier could defend against the direction of his staff. With a single strike, they were reduced to ashes. Before long, Monkey and Linghu arrived at the edge of the Dragon Burial Valley. Looking at the cliff beneath his feet, Linghu felt a wave of dizziness and could not help but gasp, retreating a few steps back instinctively. Monkey narrowed his eyes as well. In the Dragon Burial Valley, they could sense an extremely terrifying aura and energy fluctuation that was shuddering. "Boss, let's head back. This is the territory of the human race after all." "I can't help but feel uneasy." Linghu's expression was terrible. Demons could speak in human tongue after cultivating their inner cores. Although he was sad about Su Zimo's death as well, he was not as happy as Linghu. After all, he was not like Monkey who traveled thousands of miles day and night just to catch a glimpse of the place where Su Zimo died. "Boss, there's no point in you watching here. He's already jumped down." Linghu persuaded again, "Let's head back and continue occupying a mountain. We can live as happily as we want." Monkey did not reply and merely gazed at the dragon burial valley quietly. The blood glint in his eyes intensified and the killing intent around him was almost corporeal. After an unknown period of time, Monkey finally turned around slowly and the blood glint in his eyes faded. He nodded to Linghu. "Let's go." Monkey and Linghu soared into the air and vanished into the horizons in the blink of an eye. Not long after, the void above the dragon burial valley tore open without any warning with a sinister gust of wind. Two figures leaped out from within. The old man at the front was still rather composed. However, the other person was much worse and stumbled out with a pale face. His legs were wobbly and he could barely stand. The old man wore a Confucian crown and long robes. His face was flushed and his long beard swayed gently with the wind. If a table were to appear, the old man would look like a storyteller from the pugilistic world with his left hand and a folding fan with his right. The man at the back was slightly plump and beardless. He was Lin Xuanji, who had entered the Dragon Bone Valley of the Nine Forbidden Grounds with Su Zimo. The old man arrived at the edge of the Dragon Burial Valley and looked down in silence. Lin Xuanji heaved a sigh of relief and could not help but ask, "Old man, what's beneath the Dragon Burial Valley? What do you think?" The old man glanced at Lin Xuanji and asked instead. "It's nothing more than a ground full of corpses." As Lin Xuanji said that, he caught sight of a strange expression on the old man's face. A thought flashed through his mind and he jumped in fright when he thought of a possibility. "Old man, there can't be anyone alive down there, right?" "Ha!" The old man gave an odd laugh as a silent acknowledgement. Lin Xuanji rubbed his chin and said in a deep voice, "In that case, that lad might still be alive." Lin Xuanji revealed a delighted expression and chuckled. "I knew it. That lad's life is tough. How can someone who is still alive after eating a dragon egg in the Dragon Bone Valley die so easily?" However, the old man shook his head with an indifferent expression. "What you said isn't the key to this matter." "Ah." Lin Xuanji was confused. The old man continued, "The key to this matter is that even if Su Zimo isn't dead, he's no different from being dead." Lin Xuanji was deep in thought. The old man continued, "Don't forget, that lad's Jin Dan is destroyed and his inner core is shattered. It's equivalent to his entire cultivation being gone. Even if he's alive, he's no different from a mortal." Realization dawned on Lin Xuanji. The old man was right. With his Jin Dan destroyed and his inner core shattered, Su Zimo was no longer the #1 monster incarnate of history. So what if he was alive? Lin Xuanji would never have the chance to take revenge. The old man lamented and sighed gently. Back then, there was an expert behind that lad who spent a lot of effort to change his fate. Unfortunately, he couldn't win against fate in the end. Chapter 580. After an unknown period of time, Su Zimo woke up slowly. Gradually, his 5 senses began to recover. First, Su Zimo caught a whiff of the faint scent of books and ink. He did not know how long it had been stored for, but it smelled nice even though it was a little old. Thereafter, his vision gradually cleared. The surroundings were dim and countless dust particles floated before his eyes. Su Zimo struggled to sit up and realized that there were 2 wooden planks tied to his right wrist to secure his wound. His muscles were still sore and swollen. Am I not dead yet? Su Zimo surveyed his surroundings. There were rows of wooden bookshelves around him and every single one of them was filled with many ancient books. Most of the ancient books were covered in dust and it was unknown how long it had been since anyone flipped through them. It looked like a simple study room that was extremely spacious and there were at least thousands of ancient books. Su Zimo felt his head spin and his consciousness was still blurry. He only remembered that he was chased by Xuanyu Daoren and leaped into the Dragon Burial Valley. He could not remember everything that happened after that. Su Zimo shook his head and shifted his gaze. Unintentionally, his gaze landed on a bronze square tripod at the side and he gradually recalled some things. Initially, he was prepared to die the moment he leaped into the Dragon Burial Valley. However, he could not help but feel his heart ache when he caught sight of the fainted little fox in his embrace. This little thing's fate was way too tragic. She lost her mother at a young age and was imprisoned by the scarlet-armored gigantic crocodile for dozens of years. She finally regained her freedom and followed him to the outside world only to suffer such misfortune. The little fox had yet to see the beauty of the outside world. Was she going to die just like that? Su Zimo could not bear to watch and opened his storage bag. Using all his might, he pulled out the bronze square tripod and burrowed in with the little fox. The Dragon Burial Valley was known as an ominous place. Countless top experts and unparalleled experts were buried there. Nobody knew what dangers lay within, and the bronze square tripod might be their only hope of survival. Although he was in the bronze square tripod, Su Zimo could clearly sense that he was falling rapidly. The wind howled in his ears. An extremely frightening aura surged outside the bronze square tripod. A boundless power slammed against the walls of the tripod repeatedly. It was increasingly violent and frightening. Bang! Boom! Boom! Every time it collided with the cauldron, a deafening sound would erupt. The momentum was terrifying, and it seemed like the cauldron would be smashed into pieces. Su Zimo curled up his body, trying his best to protect the little fox in his arms. But under such a violent impact, Su Zimo was knocked around inside the bronze square cauldron. His tendons and bones were on the verge of cracking. His injuries were piled on top of his injuries, and his bones were about to fall apart. The terrifying roar seemed to be able to drown out everything. Su Zimo could only hear a buzzing sound in his ears. His 7 orifices were already bleeding. The external forces of the Dragon Burial Valley were too terrifying. If not for the protection of the bronze square cauldron, Su Zimo and the little fox would have been reduced to dust in an instant. After a while, an even more violent collision occurred. Su Zimo slammed heavily against the wall of the cauldron. Finally, he couldn't hold on any longer and fainted. When he woke up again, he was already in this spacious study. Could it be that there are still people alive at the bottom of the Dragon Burial Valley? Su Zimo thought to himself. Suddenly, something beside him rubbed against his leg. Su Zimo glanced sideways. He saw a furry little thing looking at him with its big watery eyes. There was a trace of concern and joy in its eyes. The little thing's fur was scarlet like flames, as though it was draped in a layer of brocade. Its eyes were like shiny black gems that were bright and spirited. This was the little fox that fell into the Dragon Burial Valley with him. Previously, the little fox was injured by Xuanyu Daoren, but it seemed like it had recovered by now. Su Zimo felt slightly comforted. I'm fine. Sensing the little fox's worry, Su Zimo smiled. My injuries this time round were a little severe. I'll be fine after resting for a few days. As he said that, he stood up and lifted the bronze square cauldron with one hand, wanting to put it back into his storage bag. Su Zimo's expression changed slightly. The bronze square cauldron did not budge at all. Although the bronze square cauldron was extremely heavy, Su Zimo could lift it effortlessly previously. But now, suddenly, Su Zimo realized something. His Jin Dan was destroyed and his inner core was shattered as well. His alchemy Dao was forcefully shattered by someone. Instinctively, Su Zimo channeled his inner core and felt a tearing pain in his chest. Ugh! Su Zimo grunted dully and his body swayed as a thin layer of sweat appeared on his forehead. The inner core was dim and lifeless, and it was covered with a series of shocking cracks. Su Zimo sensed it carefully and his expression turned even more terrible. There was no way to salvage his inner core. Jin Dan's situation was even worse. The dantian in his abdomen was empty like a black hole without a single bit of spirit energy. Su Zimo took a deep breath of air and gathered the surrounding spirit chi slowly. He could still sense the existence of spirit chi and absorb it into his body. However, the spirit chi would vanish the moment it entered his dantian and would not linger for a single moment. Right now, his dantian was like a leaky airbag. Water could enter but it would not linger. In other words, even if Su Zimo wanted to start from the chi condensation realm and cultivate step by step, it would be wishful thinking. That was also the reason why crippling Jin Dan was the cruelest punishment for cultivators. That was because they would not even have the chance to cultivate from the beginning. Su Zimo grit his teeth and his eyes shone with an unyielding gaze. He channeled his bloodline and used all his strength to lift the bronze square tripod. At the same time, he absorbed the spirit chi and made use of the short period of time the spirit chi circulated in his body to open his storage bag and send the bronze square tripod in. That was an extremely simple action. However, Su Zimo expended a huge amount of effort and was sweating profusely. His face was pale and he was panting heavily. Su Zimo smiled bitterly. Up till this point of his cultivation, he had dominated almost all cultivators of the same cultivation realm with an incomparably domineering stance. In fact, he had even killed opponents who were major cultivation realms above him. He was hailed as the #1 monster incarnate of history by the major factions. To think that he would end up in this state one day. Although Su Zimo still had the power of his bloodline, it was no longer possible for him to fight against true Jin Dan paragons. There was no way he could seek revenge against Xuanyu Daoren one day. Is this my fate? Su Zimo gripped his fists so tightly that his knuckles turned pale. I'm not willing. I'm indignant. I'm indignant. I'm going to fight against the heavens for my fate even if I have to give up everything. His sharp nails dug into his palms and blood seeped out. However, Su Zimo was oblivious to it and a demonic blood glint flashed in his eyes. The little fox squatted beside Su Zimo's feet and looked up at him worriedly. Although she could not speak, she could sense the pain and indignation in Su Zimo's heart. There was nothing more despairing than losing hope. Right then, a chant sounded from outside the door. Thus I have heard. Cultivate your body with compassion and enter Buddhist wisdom. Attain great wisdom. Come to this shore, you will be known as the boundless world. You will be able to see billions of living beings. The voice was pure and flawless like Sanskrit, reverberating endlessly and cleansing one's heart. Someone was chanting sutras outside. Chapter 581. The voice interrupted Su Zimo's thoughts. There was truly a living person at the bottom of the Dragon Burial Valley. Su Zimo pushed open the door and saw a young novice monk seated on a praying mat with his palms together. There was an ancient book in front of his chest as he chanted softly. Su Zimo was slightly stunned. In his opinion, the living person at the bottom of the Dragon Burial Valley must be someone incredible. To think that it would be such a young novice monk. The cultivation realm of the novice monk before him should not be above the Jin Dan realm. Although Su Zimo's cultivation was gone, his judgment was still there. As though he sensed something, the novice monk stopped his chanting and turned around. His eyes were clear as water and seemed as though they could reflect the pure heart of a child. Smiling gently, the novice monk stood up and clasped his palms together. Patron, you're awake. Su Zimo walked forward and bowed. I am Su Zimo. Thank you for saving my life, fellow Taoist. Patron, there's no need for that, the novice monk smiled. It's only because Master sensed something that I brought you back. Master? There was a hint of surprise in Su Zimo's tone. From the looks of it, the novice monk was not the only one at the bottom of the Dragon Burial Valley. The novice monk nodded and looked at the grand hall not far away. However, Master is in seclusion and won't be seeing anyone for the time being. The doors of the Grand Strength Hall not far away were tightly shut. Su Zimo nodded and asked, "How long was I unconscious for?" "More than a month." Su Zimo remained silent and pursed his lips, feeling a bitter taste in his mouth. Because his cultivation was destroyed, his regeneration capabilities had decreased tremendously as well. He had not recovered from his injuries even after more than a month. After a moment of silence, Su Zimo asked again, "Fellow Taoist, may I ask how long it will take for your master to come out of seclusion?" "I don't know." The novice monk shook his head. "It might be tomorrow, a year, or even 100 years. 100 years, Su Zimo smiled bitterly. Sensing Su Zimo's disappointment, the novice monk earnestly consoled him, "Benefactor, you don't have to be anxious. Time flies like a white steed flitting by a crack. 100 years is but a blink of an eye." The young novice monk looked to be in his teens. These words coming out of his mouth were neither fish nor fowl, and seemed a little strange. The novice monk continued, "If Benefactor feels bored, feel free to flip through the scriptures in the Sutra Depository. These Buddhist scriptures are extensive and profound. They contain the secrets of heaven and earth. Even if you read all the scriptures, you may not be able to pry into their profound meaning. There are endless pleasures in the sutra. Once you are immersed in it, time will pass unknowingly. 100 years is a very short time." The young novice monk spoke casually, but Su Zimo was not interested at all. Su Zimo didn't want to reject the young novice monk's good intentions, so he nodded and smiled. His gaze shifted as he surveyed his surroundings, sizing them up. There weren't many buildings in this courtyard, only two. One was the Sutra Depository Pavilion, and the other was the Great Buddha's Hall. There wasn't even a meditation room. This was a simple and crude old temple. Ancient, old. The only two buildings looked ancient as well, as though they had weathered countless storms and were filled with the scars of time. Two vegetable gardens were laid out in front of the main hall. They were the only signs of life in this place. The doors of the old temple were extremely tattered and creaked when the wind blew, as though they could collapse at any moment. Why is there such a strange old temple at the bottom of the Dragon Burial Valley? Su Zimo had a blank expression. Instantly, something seemed to have flashed through his mind. However, at that moment, Su Zimo's mind was in a mess and most of his attention was focused on how to recover his cultivation. As such, he did not think too deeply about it. After standing there for a moment, Su Zimo turned around and walked towards the entrance of the old temple. As far as the eye could see, this ancient temple was practically unobstructed. There was really nothing much to see. Su Zimo wanted to head outside and check out what was at the bottom of the Dragon Burial Valley. The young novice monk had a worried expression and could not help but say, "Benefactor, you have yet to recover from your injuries. Don't go too far, it's dangerous outside." "Thank you for your reminder, fellow Taoist. I'll be careful." Su Zimo thanked him with cupped fists and turned to leave. The moment he stepped out of the old temple, a sinister wind blew past and Su Zimo could not help but shudder. Up ahead was a winding valley with countless rocks on the ground and the walls on both sides were jagged with strange rocks. The entire Rift Valley was dead silent. Su Zimo frowned slightly and hesitated for a moment before heading forward. Although the little fox had a frightened expression, she still chose to follow behind Su Zimo. Su Zimo raised his head. Fog surged above the Rift Valley. Tens of thousands of years ago, countless experts had fought and killed each other, and the remnants of their strength converged above, forming a chaotic energy domain. Any living being that entered would be minced into a blood mist. Su Zimo's cultivation was crippled and he lost all means of levitating. Although it was easy for him to jump down, it was no longer possible for him to head up. Su Zimo realized that if he could not recover his cultivation, he would most likely exhaust his lifespan at the bottom of the valley and age slowly. However, how was he supposed to recover his cultivation? Jin Dan was shattered into pieces and dissipated completely. His dantian was a leaky existence that could not gather spirit chi at all. There was no way Jin Dan could recover. The only thing that could recover was his inner core. Although the inner core was filled with cracks, it was at least complete. However, how was he supposed to recover his inner core? Su Zimo had yet to cultivate to the realm where he could consume the essence of the sun and moon. If he wanted to cultivate as a demon, he would have to consume large amounts of life essence. It could be fresh flesh and blood, natural treasures, or even miraculous elixirs. However, apart from him, the little fox, the young novice monk and his master, there was nothing at the bottom of the Dragon Burial Valley. Without replenishing his energy, he could not even circulate the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness, let alone recover his inner core. Su Zimo fell into deep thought, but his footsteps did not stop as he walked forward instinctively. After turning a corner, the little fox suddenly stopped in her tracks and bit Su Zimo's pants, tugging at him with all her might. Su Zimo was alarmed and snapped out of his thoughts. The ground before him was filled with corpses. Some of them were lying horizontally, some were sitting on the ground, some were shattered, and there were all sorts of corpses. The ground was filled with corpses that stretched endlessly all the way to the end of the valley. Su Zimo realized that those corpses should have been buried in this valley during the catastrophe 10,000 years ago. Even after 10,000 years, those corpses did not have any signs of decay and were sparkling like jade. Among those corpses, Su Zimo even caught sight of a complete body that had not decayed. How frightening was this person when he was alive? His body had not decayed even after 10,000 years. Suddenly, Su Zimo sensed a red glint at the corner of his eyes and turned around instinctively. Su Zimo's pupils constricted and his hairs stood on end. A few drops of blood splattered on the surrounding stone walls. A single glance was enough for Su Zimo to feel a sharp pain in his eyes and his eyeballs almost exploded. What sort of expert's blood is this? To think that it possesses such frightening might. Even after 10,000 years, a single drop of blood nearly killed Su Zimo. Right then, a strong sense of danger surged into his mind. Chapter 582. A sinister wind howled without any warning. 100 feet in front of him, phantoms appeared one after another and menacing faces appeared before disappearing rapidly. Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat as he suddenly realized something. The otherworldly soldiers that appeared in the Great Qian ruins were merely some imperial army guards that were buried back then. What sort of people were buried at the bottom of the Dragon Burial Valley? Their bodies had not decayed even after 10,000 years. Just the blood stains on the stone wall contained a great power. The otherworldly soldiers that the Imperial Army Guards transformed into could fight against perfected Jin Dan. How terrifying would it be if the souls of those fallen experts lingered and gathered with resentment? Hurry, let's go. Su Zimo hollered and hugged the little fox, turning to run back the way he came. Thankfully, he was not far from the old temple and could reach it in more than 10 breaths if he sprinted at full speed with his physical burst. There was a turn up ahead. Although Su Zimo was distracted along the way, he could vaguely remember that he had only taken a turn. In other words, he would be able to see the nameless old temple after making the turn up ahead. However, when Su Zimo walked over, he paused instinctively. There was no old temple up ahead. There were only corpses that were piled up into mountains. Not far away, there was a sticky river of blood that blocked his path with a nauseating stench. One after another, horrifying faces appeared on the surface of the river of blood with sinister smiles. Su Zimo narrowed his gaze and focused. The scene before him had not disappeared yet. On the contrary, the corpses seemed to have come alive one after another. The corpses struggled to stand up with rotting flesh hanging from their bodies and a foul stench. Staggering, they staggered towards Su Zimo. Pairs of arms extended from the river of blood up ahead as well. Many bloody figures crawled onto the shore and grinned with bloodshot eyes. Su Zimo felt chills run down his spine and sweat appeared on his forehead. The little fox trembled even more in fear. It burrowed into Su Zimo's arms and covered its eyes with its tiny paws, not daring to poke its head out. There were only two possibilities in the current situation. Firstly, the sutra chamber and the little monk that he saw at the beginning were merely illusions. There was no 10,000-year-old temple at the bottom of the Dragon Burial Valley. Secondly, he didn't leave his original spot at all. Normally, one would be able to see the nameless ancient temple after turning a corner. But now, Su Zimo sprinted the entire way without stopping for a single moment. He could clearly sense that he had turned a corner, but he could not see any traces of the ancient temple, only a mountain of corpses and a river of blood with a torrential malevolence. No matter which possibility it was not optimistic. The first possibility was that there was a terrifying existence here that could easily confuse his senses, causing him to see illusions. The sutra depository was fake, the ancient temple was fake, and the young novice monk was also fake. The Dragon Burial Valley was formed 10,000 years ago. How could there be such an ancient temple at the bottom of the valley? The only thing that Su Zimo believed in was the little novice monk's clear eyes. That gaze could not be faked. The second possibility was that Su Zimo had encountered the ghost wall that was rumored in the mortal world. Su Zimo felt that he was sprinting forward without stopping. In reality, he had not left his original spot. There was an evil spirit that used supreme dermic powers to confuse Su Zimo's senses, causing him to lose his direction and spin on the spot. All of a sudden. Suddenly, Su Zimo felt as though something was blowing at the back of his neck. Pust! Instantly, Su Zimo's hairs stood on end. Without hesitation, Su Zimo's eyes shone with a ferocious glint as he threw a punch in reverse. Piak! His fist landed on empty air with a crisp sound. There was no one behind him at all. Su Zimo took a deep breath of air and was about to turn and leave when he suddenly discovered a woman with disheveled hair standing not far away. She was dressed in white robes that were stained with blood. The woman's back was facing him and he could not see her appearance as she was motionless. Any existence that appeared at the bottom of the Dragon Burial Valley was much more terrifying than the ones in the Great Qian ruins. The otherworldly soldiers in the ruins were incorporeal. He did not know how terrifying the woman before him was when she was alive or how much resentment she had in her heart that the malevolent qi could even nourish her flesh. Notwithstanding the fact that Su Zimo's cultivation was crippled, even if he was at his peak condition, he would definitely not be able to escape death if he encountered those existences. Su Zimo did not dare to act recklessly and glared at the white-bloused woman not far away with a tense expression. All of a sudden, the white-bloused woman moved. She did not move at all from her neck down. However, the woman's head turned strangely to the back and faced Su Zimo. The woman's mouth, nostrils and ears were stained with blood. She did not have eyeballs, only a pair of bloody holes. The woman smiled sinisterly and her scarlet tongue drooped down like an anaconda. The little fox had just popped her head out and peeked through the gaps between her fingers when she caught sight of that. Ah! The little fox exclaimed and fainted from fright. Even Su Zimo, who had been through a lot, felt chills run down his spine and his limbs go limp, let alone her. The white-bloused woman moved and lunged forward with an evil gust of wind. Su Zimo extended his right hand hurriedly and blocked in front of him. His strength could not threaten the white-bloused woman at all. The only thing that could make a difference was the divine phoenix bone. Swoosh! Suddenly, the white-bloused woman stopped in her tracks and glared at Su Zimo's right hand with a pair of bloody holes, as though she was wary. Tisk, tsk, tsk. The white-bloused woman laughed sinisterly and her figure flashed. Just like that, she vanished completely right in front of Su Zimo. Su Zimo was alarmed and hurriedly scanned his surroundings. There was no trace of the white-bloused woman beside him, as though everything just now was just his imagination. Su Zimo knew that the difference between them was way too great. Although the white-bloused woman was formed from malevolent chi, her strength was most likely not weaker than a void reversion and her dermic powers were boundless. In fact, she might even be comparable to the Dharma Dao Jun. Up ahead, corpses with rotting flesh and blood figures that crawled out of the blood river were closing in rapidly. Suddenly, a blood figure lunged forward and revealed a menacing face. Opening its mouth, it bit towards Su Zimo's throat. Hurriedly, Su Zimo turned his right hand into a palm knife and stabbed it viciously towards the blood figure. Shing! Flames shone brightly. Without a single sound, the blood figure was engulfed by a ball of blazing flames. The other corpses and blood figures stopped in their tracks. Those malevolent and evil beings were most afraid of lightning and flames. Naturally, they could sense the terrifying power contained within the divine phoenix bone. Even so, the corpses and blood figures refused to leave. They merely stood not far away and glared at Su Zimo coldly as sticky saliva dripped down slowly. Right then, a white figure appeared silently behind Su Zimo and gradually materialized. It was the white-bloused woman who just now had disappeared. Licking her lips, the white-bloused woman's eye sockets surged with blood. Reaching out with her bony palms, her fingertips shone with a cold glint as she grabbed Su Zimo's head slowly. Chapter 583. All of a sudden. A series of Sanskrit sounds echoed through the Rift Valley with a mysterious might that shook one's mind. Om. Ma. Ni. Pa. Mi. Hum. With every single Sanskrit sound, the entire void would tremble violently. The corpses and blood figures that were initially in front of Su Zimo had all vanished. There were no corpse mountains or blood rivers. Everything was just an illusion. The only thing that truly existed was the skinny white palm that hovered above Su Zimo's head. Not far away, a young monk walked over slowly. Although he was young, he had a dignified expression and his eyes shone with two divine lights as he glared behind Su Zimo. The young monk held a string of Buddha beads in his right hand as he chanted Sanskrit continuously. In his left palm was a lotus platform that shone with a mysterious glow. As the young monk walked over, the illusions that were in Su Zimo's vision dissipated, revealing a winding rift valley once more. He was standing at a bend in the rift valley and the dilapidated old temple was not far ahead. When the white-bloused woman saw the young monk appear, her expression turned uncertain. The pair of bloody holes on her face faced the lotus platform in the young monk's hands hesitantly, as though she was wary. "Ghost, what are you waiting for? Hurry and leave." The young monk had a stern expression as he hollered softly. Raising the lotus platform in his left hand, he pushed it gently in the direction of the white-bloused woman. The lotus platform floated in midair and drifted over. The pure white lotus petals bloomed one after another from the outside to the inside, layer by layer. As the lotus petals bloomed, the entire lotus platform released an extremely frightening aura. Ah! The white-bloused woman shrieked and turned into mist, fleeing into the distance and disappearing in the blink of an eye. The young monk strode forward and retracted his lotus platform. Tugging at Su Zimo's sleeves, he whispered, "Patron, hurry and leave." With that, the young monk turned and ran towards the old temple. Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat as he chased after hurriedly. Thankfully, they were not too far away from the old temple and the two of them returned within more than 10 breaths. The young monk turned and closed the door before heaving a sigh of relief. "Thank you for saving my life, fellow Taoist," Su Zimo bowed and thanked him. The young monk waved it off with a smile. "You're too polite, patron. This is my duty." "I still don't know your dermic name, fellow Taoist?" Su Zimo asked. The young monk replied, "I'm Mingzhen." "Mingzhen, Mingzhen," Su murmured softly. Pure, sincere and true. That was the feeling that the young monk gave Su Zimo. The word truth was indeed enough to describe everything. The ghosts and monsters outside are extremely ferocious and their powers are boundless. Even I am no match for them. Mingjin explained, earlier on, that malevolent ghost was wary of this lotus platform and thought that master was here. That was why it turned and fled. If we wait for her to react, we'll be in trouble. Su Zimo felt guilty. Just now, I was careless and nearly implicated you. 8 years of cultivation were destroyed overnight and he was reduced from the #1 monster incarnate of history to a mortal. Anyone would find it hard to accept such a huge blow. Just now, he left the old temple partly because he was curious and wanted to see what was outside. At the same time, he was truly frustrated. His state of mind was still greatly affected. As though he could sense the frustration in Su Zimo's heart, Mingjin said, "Actually, you won't be in any danger as long as you don't leave this place. Although this courtyard isn't big, you can walk around freely and browse through the sutras in the sutra chamber as well. At that time, we can compare our insights and comprehend Buddhism together." Pausing for a moment, Mingjin seemed to have thought of something and reminded hurriedly, "Right, patron, please don't go to the backyard of the Grand Hall." After saying that, Mingjin seemed to have thought of something terrifying and shrunk his neck with a hint of fear in his eyes. Su Zimo was shocked. Just now, Mingjin was domineering and fearless against that menacing evil ghost with torrential dermic powers. Why did he reveal such an expression at the mention of the backyard of the Grand Hall? What was behind the Grand Hall that Mingjin was so wary of? Furthermore, Su Zimo noticed a detail. Just now, when he wanted to head out, Mingjin merely reminded him that it was dangerous outside and he should not wander too far. But now, Mingjin was warning Su Zimo with absolute certainty not to head to the backyard of the Grand Hall. Su Zimo nodded. He truly did not want to cause any more trouble for Mingjin. After giving his reminder, Mingjin sat back on the cushion and took out the thick ancient book from his storage bag. He flipped it open carefully and buried his head in it. At that moment, the little fox woke up slowly. However, she was rather frightened and stayed in Su Zimo's embrace, refusing to leave. After reading for a while, Mingjin seemed to have thought of something and handed the ancient book to Su Zimo, saying sincerely, "Patron, if you don't know which sutra to start with, why don't you take a look at this sutra? You'll definitely benefit greatly. Every single word in this sutra is precious and contains the mysteries of heaven and earth. Each time you read it, you'll gain a different understanding. It's truly exquisite." Su Zimo smiled bitterly internally. Right now, he was not in the mood. Even if his cultivation was still present, he might not be able to read those obscure sutras. Su Zimo declined tactfully, "I haven't recovered from my injuries and it's not good for me to expend too much mental energy. You can read it first." Mingjin was doubtful and said in confusion, "Chanting sutras, paying respects to Buddha and comprehending the Tao are the most enjoyable things in the world. Why would it expend mental energy?" Mingjin shook his head, as though he could not understand Su Zimo's words. When Su Zimo saw how passionate Mingjin was, he felt a little embarrassed and asked, "What's the name of this ancient book? I'll go look for it after you're done reading it." Of course, that was merely a casual question from Su Zimo, he did not really want to read it. "Mystic Dermic Lotus Sutra." "Oh." Su Zimo replied distractedly. The moment he turned around, his expression changed. "Mystic Dermic Lotus Sutra." Su Zimo looked at Mingjin in disbelief and asked again. "That's right." Mingjin nodded his head naturally. Su Zimo's mouth opened slightly and he stood there in a daze for a moment before smiling bitterly. The Mystic Dermic Lotus Sutra was known as the #1 secret skill of the Tao of Cores. 10,000 years ago, Fahua Monastery was destroyed in that shocking calamity and the Mystic Dermic Lotus Sutra was lost as well. Even after such a long time, no one had discovered any traces of the Mystic Dermic Lotus Sutra. That was the reason why there was a rumor in the cultivation world. It was that the mystic Dharmic Lotus Sutra was buried in the Great Qian ruins. The reason why Su Zimo rushed to the Great Qian ruins was not for the vermilion fruit, half of the reason was for the mystic Dharmic Lotus Sutra. However, it was a pity that fate made fools of him. By the time he saw the mystic Dharmic Lotus Sutra for real, he could no longer cultivate it. The rumors were right, the mystic Dharmic Lotus Sutra was indeed in the Great Qian ruins. However, who would have thought that the sutra would be at the bottom of the Dragon Burial Valley? Su Zimo finally realized why there was such a strange, old, and crude monastery at the bottom of the Dragon Burial Valley. There was a high chance that this monastery was built by the surviving monks of Fahua and Daming monasteries back then. However, what was the purpose of building such a monastery at the bottom of the valley? Chapter 584. In the world of cultivators, the mystic Dharmic Lotus Sutra, the number one secret art of alchemy that could raise a storm of blood, was now in the hands of an unknown novice monk. There was no fight or bloodshed. In fact, the novice monk even chose to share it proactively. It had to be said that this was truly ironic. What was even more ironic was that by the time Su Zimo caught sight of the mystic Dharmic Lotus Sutra, he had already lost the right to cultivate it. Although the mystic Dharmic Lotus Sutra was indeed a supreme secret manual of the Buddhist monasteries, it could not allow someone with a shattered dantian to cultivate anew. Xuanyu Daoren was way too ruthless. With every punch and kick, he severed all of Su Zimo's hopes. Gripping his fists tightly, Su Zimo raised his head slightly with an unyielding gaze. Nobody can stop me in my tracks. Nobody can stop me. Even in the face of such a blow, Su Zimo did not give up. He would not choose to bow down to fate. Someone had once spent all their effort to change his fate. If he were to admit defeat now, it would be equivalent to letting that person down. Su Zimo assumed a lotus position and began to sense the spirit chi of heaven and earth, gathering it towards his dantian bit by bit. However, the spirit chi did not linger after entering his body and dantian and dissipated right away. His dantian was like a bottomless black hole that devoured everything. Su Zimo was not discouraged at all. Just like that, he gathered and condensed chi continuously before watching it disappear. The cycle repeated itself. A month passed. 2 months passed. In the blink of an eye, half a year passed. Su Zimo's injuries had long healed. However, his body's condition did not improve at all. This place was isolated from the world and did not have any flesh or universal treasures that contained life force essence. When they were hungry, the two humans and fox would pluck some vegetables and fruits from the garden. After drinking, they would draw some cool well water from the depths of the ground. For cultivators, that did not affect them much. Cultivators absorbed the spirit chi of heaven and earth into their bodies to cultivate and raise their cultivation realms. However, demonic cultivation required a large amount of life force essence. After half a year, Su Zimo's mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness had almost come to a standstill. His inner core was still filled with cracks without any signs of recovery. In terms of cultivation, half a year of chi gathering had not aroused the slightest reaction from his dantian. His dantian was still empty and desolate. Of course, Su Zimo hadn't come out empty-handed in the past 6 months. In the sutra depository, there were many secret manuals of the Buddhist sect. To his surprise, he discovered that he could actually understand these originally obscure and boring scriptures. It was as if he had suddenly been enlightened. Time flew by. Unknowingly, another half a year had passed. Su Zimo had stayed at the bottom of the Dragon Burial Valley for almost a year now. After a year, his inner core showed no signs of healing. The dantian in his lower abdomen was also like a pool of stagnant water, without any ripples or signs of life. Su Zimo's gaze was no longer as firm and unshakable as before. Could it be that he was going to continue cultivating like a fool? When would there be a turn for the better? After standing in the courtyard and pondering for a moment, Su Zimo made a decision and opened his storage bag, retrieving the 10,000-year vermilion fruit within. The vermilion fruit was bright red and crystalline, emitting a scorching energy. The 10,000-year vermilion fruit was stained with the blood of too many people. It wasn't just the younger generation of the North region, even Jining Jinjuan had lost hundreds of people. Taking a deep breath of air, Su Zimo swallowed the vermilion fruit and assumed a lotus position to sense the changes in his body. The vermilion fruit contained a massive amount of life force essence. The life force essence formed a violent storm that engulfed his entire body, flowing through his flesh, blood, bones and organs. Su Zimo composed himself and controlled the storm to surge towards his dantian. Under normal circumstances, the energy of a single vermilion fruit was enough to help perfected Jin Dan advance by a minor cultivation realm. In other words, if he was at late-stage Jin Dan realm, he would be able to advance to perfected Jin Dan realm right after consuming the vermilion fruit and would only be half a step away from nascent soul realm. Su Zimo did not have extravagant hopes of recovering his cultivation. He merely hoped that he could store a trace of spirit qi in his dantian, even if he had to return to level 1 qi condensation. Unfortunately, the energy storm did not cause much of a stir after entering his dantian. It was devoured cleanly by his dantian that resembled a black hole without leaving a single trace behind. Su Zimo opened his eyes with a lost and lonely expression. Over the past year, he had experienced countless failures, but he had never once felt discouraged. But now, Su Zimo was depressed and his beliefs were wavering. Sensing the disappointment in Su Zimo's heart, the little fox had a worried expression and rubbed her cheek against Su Zimo's arm gently, consoling him. "Little thing, I'm sorry to have implicated you." Su Zimo stroked the little fox's back gently and laughed mockingly. "Initially, I wanted to bring you out of that dark cave. To think that I would fall into another cave instead." Hiya. Although the little fox could not speak in human language, she waved her tiny paws and took a deep breath before gesturing above her head. Su Zimo could understand what she was saying. The little fox was saying that this place was great. There was a vast sky and fresh air here. Thereafter, the little fox pointed to herself and Su Zimo. She blinked her large, watery eyes and blushed in an extremely alluring manner. Su Zimo lowered his head and did not see it, merely smiling in disappointment. He suddenly realized that there was a high chance that he would be trapped at the bottom of the Dragon Burial Valley for the rest of his life, waiting for his lifespan to run out and he would age slowly. There was no need to talk about revenge either. There was no need to talk about pursuing Dayu either. Suddenly, Sanskrit sounded from within the old temple. All dharmas are like dreams, illusions, bubbles and shadows. They are like dew and lightning. They should be viewed as such. The Sanskrit was like the sounds of nature that reached one's heart. Compared to the little monk's Sanskrit, it was even more shocking and contained a dharmic power that could calm one's heart. Instantly, the frustration in Su Zimo's heart lessened significantly. Su Zimo turned towards the source of the voice.